Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 296, Edwards versus Covington. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, is Keith Schillen, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. For those who listen to the show a lot, you can probably tell from my voice, I've had a cold all week. I was pretty bad Thursday and Friday. But I'm telling you right now, man, I wasn't missing this preview for anything. Like friggin' COVID, swine flu, malaria. I didn't give a shit. I could have been on my deathbed. I could have been in hospice, and I'd be like, give me the mic.
You can't see it from here, but Keith has an IV in his left arm right now, like just trickling life-saving like fluids into his system.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. The third leg of the Schillen and Duffy show, Devin Tejada jumped in for the recap of UFC Vegas 83 last night. He did a better job than many of the referees and judges on the actual card. So, as always, thanks to him for being Johnny on the spot. But it's good to have the dynamic duo back, and I'm glad that we were both able to make it because this is the final UFC show of the year. It's really the second to last major show of any kind for the year. Ryzen is putting together one hell of a New Year's Eve party with basically all their top properties figuring to be in the cage. But this is the final hurrah of 2023 for North American Western MMA, and the UFC is pulling out all the stops. I can already tell from your level of excitement for this that you're probably going to give this card a pretty good grade on paper, but hit it. How's this one look to you on paper?
Dude, I'm giving this an A. Like I think it's fantastic. A plus maybe. I mean, it's got everything you want. I mean, you got two title fights. You have, and I know a lot of people. Some people are upset with the Covington being in the title picture, and I understand that. But I mean, you get two title fights. You go from top to bottom every single fight. There's not one fight that I'm not interested in. Either you have ranked fighters going against each other, or you have rising prospects, or you have action, guys that you're going to bring action, or you have like people with intriguing stories or something like that. So, and then a lot of times you have multiple of those boxes checked. Mm-hmm. So I love it. Like this, there's no bathroom break in this one, man. This is a good card.
There really isn't. There's one heavyweight fight on the card, and even that one might be over quickly. Too quick to take a bathroom break or a smoke break. I agree. What we want out of a pay-per-view card is obviously title fights. That's what the UFC has led us to expect. We've got two great ones here. As you pointed out, some people have taken issue with how much or whether Covington deserves this title shot. But if you're Leon Edwards, you're the champ, and you're making pay-per-view points off of this one, you're probably secretly glad that it's Colby Covington and not Bilal Muhammad, because you're probably going to sell a few more pay-per-views and arguably have an easier night at the office. I mean, we'll talk about that when we get to it. But and then Pantoja versus Royval, and draw any two top flyweights out of a hat is always the axiom we go with. But even by the standards of flyweights, these are two of the craziest guys in the division and two of the best. There's no way that sucks. And then, as you said, going down the card, some of the hottest prospects, some prospects with something to prove, a couple of people whose name value probably exceeds their competitive value at this point. We got Cody Garbrandt and Tony Ferguson on this card. Yeah, it's got a little bit of something for everybody. I do have to take some issue with you, Keith. Now, obviously, Keith is a busy man. In his day-to-day life, he keeps the mean streets of Pawtucket, Rhode Island safe. He is also obviously our man for the Sherdog Radio previews and recaps. But those of you who are regulars know that his third honorary job is ordering UFC cards. He's not the matchmaker. He's just the guy that puts the fights in order. Now, Keith, sleeping on the job, Randy Brown versus Muslim Salikhov is the curtain jerker. Defend that.
Have you seen the rest of the card?
Yeah, we have a battle of borderline top 15 welterweights and two veteran action fighters in the literal opening fight of the night. And while, yeah, that should probably be higher on the card, I mean, that's this close to being good enough to be a fight night headliner by itself.
Oh, absolutely. And you need Randy Brown to be done early, so in case a light bulb goes out or something, he can just reach up there for you and change it.
And this is not the Apex. We're talking about the T-Mobile. He's reaching like 60 feet into the air. He's like, there, it's like just working in the back of the jumbotron.
There you go.
This also has something that Keith is a fan of. If you watch any of our recaps, we tend to do matchmaking for the notable winners as well as losers. And anytime there is a veteran fighter, like former contender, former champ, someone who still has significant name value, who lost or looked really bad in victory, when we matchmake them, I tend to take the kinder, gentler route. Give them a winnable fight. Give them a little victory lap. I'm doing the equivalent of putting them out there at Amanda Hebus's sanctuary for cute and cuddly animals, and Keith just wants to grind them up and use them as dragster fuel. This has got plenty of that. Tony Ferguson versus Paddy Pimblett. Cody Garbrandt. Well, I mean, Garbrandt and Kelleher is a little more appropriate, but Josh Emmett versus Bryce Mitchell. It's definitely a case. Stephen Thompson. Yeah, third from the top. Stephen Thompson versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. Because Keith is literally the guy who'll say, well, if Nate Diaz wants another fight, just make him fight Shavkat Rakhmonov at 170. Use the washed up old guy to put the new guy over. This card's got plenty of that. Plenty of feeding the old lions to the young lions on this card. We'll see if any of the old lions have a little bite left in them. We'll get to all 14 of these fights individually. But any other general thoughts on this card before we dive in?
Yeah, the other thing I'd say real quick that's exciting about the flyweight co-main event, it's the first time we haven't had Davison Figueiredo or Brendan Moreno in that fight in a really long time.
I mean, how spoiled are we that we're glad to be past, one of the greatest rivalries.
That was one of the greatest rivalries ever, but
it really was. But no, it's good to have something new. And again, never say never, but I find it really hard to imagine that won't be a super exciting fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
First up on the UFC 296 undercard is a welterweight clash between Randy Brown and Muslim Salikhov. Brown, the 33-year-old Jamaican-American, is 17-5 overall. He is 11-5 in the UFC. He did win his last time out. He welcomed former middleweight Wellington Turman to the welterweight division, won a unanimous decision over him. That was at UFC on ABC, Emmett versus Topuria back in June. That allowed him to put a quick and ugly loss to Jack Della Maddalena back in February in the rear view. He'll look to make it 2 wins in a row now at the expense of Salikhov. Salikhov, 39-year-old Dagestani, is 19-4 overall. He is 6-3 in the UFC. He is coming in off of a loss, and he has, in fact, alternated wins and losses for his last few fights. He faced Nicholas Dalby at UFC on ESPN Vittori versus Cannonier back in June, dropped a unanimous decision. Prior to that, he had a spectacular highlight reel knockout over Andre Fialho a little over a year ago. Odds here favor Brown pretty heavily. He is minus 250, Salikhov plus 200. Keith, I'm going to flip this one to you first. All I'll throw out there is I keep waiting for Muslim Salikhov to look old, just with such a movement-heavy style and literally pushing 40. I mean, he's 39 and he's almost 39 and a half. It hasn't happened yet, win or lose. Tell me if you think this is when Father Time finally takes over, jumps on his back, or, in any event, whether he gets past Brown.
Yeah. Salikhov's that guy that you're at the gym and you're slowly running on the treadmill at 40 years old and you look over and it's this 65-year-old guy just freaking going way faster than you. You're like, fuck you and your V8 drink. How's your jitsu game? Then he's tapping you out. Fuck. Yeah. I was thinking about Randy Brown putting in a light bulb, and then Randy Brown holds the light bulb, and Salikhov spin kicks it into place. This is a fun fight right away. I mean, they're based on their ages, specifically Salikhov, they're not going to be good. They're not true contenders at welterweights, considering I mean, we can go back and forth in debate, but it's either bantamweight or welterweight, or that, those 4 divisions that it's so hard to even get in the top 15. Like you're a freaking killer. It's like people like talk junk about like starting quarterbacks, and it's like in the NFL, it's like there's only 32 of them on planet Earth. So, Randy Brown. Obviously he's, we already joked about him. He's a long, lengthy guy. He definitely wants to work from range. He moves around the cage really well with good footwork, uses feints well to set up his shots, fast hands. He loves the up jab. He uses the jab to kind of keep his distance. Really good long kicking game. He's got those long legs though, so he's open to calf kicks, but he's got some pretty good calf kicks himself. I go back to the Vicente Luque fight where Luque beat him up and dropped him with leg kicks. I like his teep kicks. I think that's the best part of his game. Pushes people on his back foot with that. If his opponent crashes the pocket, he's really good at being the one to initiate the clinch and then use his size inside, getting the collar tie and then start blasting knees. He will look for a takedown. I've compared him to Michael Chiesa in the style where he's not very technical. He kind of just reaches down, but he has those long arms. It's like Go Gadget, just snatches that leg in. He also can get inside and get some body lock takedown and stuff. He does need to have better control, and I think that just comes from not being a true grappler. He's not going to Abu Dhabi's. He's not wrestling at a high level. So I think that happens, but he's got 4 subs on his record, and he has over the years improved his get-up game. He gets up much better. Now, despite being 39 years old, Muslim Salikhov, you mentioned, he's still a really good athlete. He moves well. He's got good head movement. He's good at slipping his head off the center line and then just ripping shots of his own, as he's avoiding shots. Really good at picking up his opponent's timing. I would say he has plus power. He sits on his punches. I go back. It's been a while ago, but he starts Northern Italy in a fight. Some of the best kicks in the game. Kicks everywhere. He has that. He has a. I know I compare a lot of guys to the guy. Who's the guy in Bellator was a champion for a long time? Yeah. Shamenko. He has that Shamenko thing going for him. He's like UFC's version. And he's probably how Shamenko would have done in the UFC. Yeah. I know it's a little different division, but he was upper division, but still.
He should have been a welterweight, but yeah.
Yeah, he should have been. Well, yeah, that's a good point. I am worried about his chin a little bit. He was recently knocked out by Li Jingliang. He took a lot of damage in his last fight against Nicholas Dalby. That's what Dalby does, He loves spinning attacks. We already joked about that. He knocked out Andre Fiallo with a spinning attack. It was fantastic. And he's obviously you look at his name, he can wrestle. He's a good wrestler, really good reactionary double. I was looking at his record. He's gotten takedown in 4, at least one takedown in 4 straight fights. So something he's been actually adding on as he gets later in his career, adding more wrestling, which is very rare for someone at his age. It's usually the opposite. Usually that's when they abandon their wrestling. Yeah. He also catch a kick to get the fight to the ground. He's also does need to improve his control, but he's got 3 subs. So I was surprised that the line was as big as it was. I was a little bit on the fence in this one because I like both guys. I think both guys have a lot of raw talent. Salikhov is such a great athlete, but Brown it's so hard to pick against these long, lengthy guys. I'm going to go with Brown here because, he's older than I like, and he's older than I think he is. I think he's 33, which is always surprising because he still feels like a prospect.
Yeah.
But he's still at the age where I don't think he can fall apart overnight. And I still don't trust that with Salikhov. I could, we've seen that before. Dalby and his style and his grinding style and his staying in your face and having output was an issue for Salikhov. And I think Brown can kind of have the same thing. So I'm going to say Brown with his volume. Brown is one of the few guys that Salikhov is not going to have a kicking advantage just because of the leg difference. That kicking range would actually work against him. So give me Brown by decision.
Yeah, this one was similarly tough for me to pick, and I was a little surprised that Brown was such a big favorite. Salikhov, I agree that Brown, it feels like he should be younger than he is. This is his 17th UFC fight.
That's nuts. He still feels like a prospect.
He still feels like a prospect, and I think it's because he was so raw when he came to the UFC. He's really developed and learned and kind of become the fighter he is under the bright lights. So yeah, he still has that young prospect feel, and at the same time, Salikhov, it feels like a guy that's been on the cusp of kind of the top 15 for several years. But like, it's the same thing I always say about lightweight. They are such fast moving waters that it doesn't even matter if you keep winning all your fights. If you don't fight often enough, you're going to get passed. And that was the case with Salikhov. He's been a once or at best twice a year fighter since like 2017. And so even though he has a bunch of elite wins and no really bad losses, it's just not quite enough to get him over the hump. Brown still has that upside. He feels like a guy that is still putting things together, and the Della Maddalena loss was very sobering, because all of a sudden Brown was starting to look like a possible top 10 guy, and then he ran into Della Maddalena, and we remembered, okay, one, Della Maddalena is really good. Two, Brown, he's no longer the kind of guy that finds spectacular ways to lose fights, or never before seen ways to lose fights. But when he loses, he does still tend to lose spectacularly. And that's why, even though I'm picking him, if Salikhov wins, I'm going to look real silly, because Salikhov's going to just do something absolutely wild, like hit the tallest guy in the division with a spinning wheel kick or something.
Imagine that's how the evening starts.
If so,
and they still make Randy Brown change the light bulb.
Yeah. Give him the smelling salts and a light bulb. It will be interesting to see if Salikhov turns to his wrestling. I've said a few times there seem to be two kinds of Dagestani fighters: ones who are pure wrestler and learn to strike to some extent or another, and then ones who are really flashy, exotic strikers and will surprise you with how sound their wrestling is, because he's going to have plenty of opportunities to bring this thing to the canvas. Brown loves to kick. You mentioned his teep up the middle. It's a fantastic rangefinder that also takes the wind out of his opponent, stops their forward progress. But I could see Salikhov eating one of those, then catching the second and running Brown to the ground. And that's where it might get really interesting. There's plenty of upset potential here. I could see Salikhov saying, forget the spinning stuff. I'm not going to get into a tornado kick match with a guy twice my size. I could see him just being sensible and turning this into a grind, maybe trying to take Brown down and win rounds that way. But I am going to go with Brown to edge out the decision here, probably in a really fun back and forth fight where both guys have, moments of spectacular offense, moments where the momentum is theirs, but give me Brown to come out just a little bit ahead. Next up at UFC 296 is the lone heavyweight match on the card. It features Martin Buday versus Shamil Gaziev. Buday, the 32-year-old from Slovakia, is 13-1 as a professional mixed martial artist. He's a perfect 4-0 since joining the UFC out of Season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. His last appearance was back in August, where he tapped out Josh Parisian late in the first round with a Kimura. He'll look to make it 5 in a row, and even in 2024, that's enough to get you under the outskirts of the rankings in the UFC heavyweight division. He'll have to get through Gaziev to do so. Gaziev, 33-year-old Dagestani by way of Bahrain, is a perfect 11-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. This will be his debut. He fought on the Contender Series in September, tapping out Greg Velasco in the first round. Prior to that, he was a standout at Brave CF, which is when he sort of started claiming Bahrain as his home country. Odds here, Buday is a moderate favorite. He's minus 180, Gaziev plus 150. Here's the thing. I think Shamil Gaziev is just another guy at heavyweight, but I don't know, because the level of competition that he has fought on his way up is just, it's not good. The first half of his run ahead of the Contender Series is just throwaway stuff. It is him squashing grotesquely overmatched Russian heavyweights in like 15 seconds apiece. But even once he got to like Ukraine and Bahrain that had, some better promotions for him to fight in, the one time he went the distance was against Kirill Kornilov. Kornilov is actually a pretty good fighter. Like, Kornilov is better than several heavyweights in the UFC. He's probably better than any of the people Buday has beaten so far. And Gaziev, he showed he can go 3 rounds. It was a really close fight, but that's the only time he's been the distance. His last fight in Brave before he came to the Contender Series was against Darko Stosic. You may remember him as the guy that washed out of the UFC on 3 straight bad losses at light heavyweight. Like he's about a top 70 light heavyweight. Yeah. Just Gaziev, he's unproven. And Velasco really no better. Velasco's was a huge unathletic guy that got dropped with Gaziev's first punch and tapped out in minutes. So I think Gaziev is just okay, but I really don't know, and I won't know until he faces Buday. I feel as though I have a pretty good handle on Buday. Even in a division full of big people, it is heavyweight. Buday is probably the biggest heavyweight in the UFC. The UFC announcers will not hesitate to tell you. Well, yeah.
except for light heavyweight Johnny Walker.
They'll be quick to tell you that Buday used to weigh 360 pounds, and he looks like he still probably pushes 3 bills out of camp. He's a guy that definitely must cut to get to the heavyweight limit. He's just absolutely gigantic. He's like mid-career what's his name? Giant dude from Iowa. Oh, he's like mid-career Ben Rothwell with end-career Ben Rothwell's athleticism. He's just a huge giant guy who's.
Is he like mid-career Tim Sylvia, and then end-career Tim Sylvia?
I mean something like that. Just a giant guy who's. I mean, he's more coordinated than he looks, but he's not fast. He's the definition of a lumbering heavyweight. He has decent power, but not the kind of he doesn't have the kind of power you would expect from, again, the biggest guy in the division. He has decent pop, good volume for a guy as huge as he is, who cuts as much weight as he does. He does throw good volume. He does throw punches in combination. He's certainly willing to maul people in the clinch, just kind of use his height and bulk and just make people wear his weight and try to wear him down. He prefers to conduct things on the feet, but if they go to the ground, he can certainly take care of himself there. He's not faced the best slate of competition either. I don't think you could get to 4-0 in the UFC heavyweight division any easier than Buday did. Chris Barnett, Lucas Dresky, Jake Collier, Josh Parisian. I mean, Buday is basically the push broom of that division. He's just, I know what Buday is. I'm picking him to just be there and not go away when Gaziev tries to put him away early. Probably wins kind of a slow, grinding fight where both guys are tired in the 3rd round, but Gaziev is more tired and Buday just doesn't have what it takes to put him away. This is my anti-fight of the night pick. We might be talking about this Saturday night as the only bad fight on the card, and I'm open to being shocked. If Gaziev just floors him with a single punch, taps him out in seconds, it looks like Fedor versus Sylvia, then Gaziev is more of the real deal than I gave him credit for. But I will believe that when I see it. Right now, Gaziev, untested, and we don't know what we have in him yet. But yeah, give me Buday to win a lousy fight here.
Yeah, man, I'm going to respectfully disagree. I actually like this fight. Okay. You give me, undefeated heavyweight who's got a bunch of stoppages. Yeah, I agree that he beat. I think he's beating a little bit better competition, you say, but still, I get it. He hasn't faced UFC competition, but taking on a guy who's 4-0 in the UFC, who I actually have kind of grown on, But I was not a guy when he first made his UFC debut, I was saying terrible stuff about him, I was making fun of him. He's still a really bad athlete, We would have him change the light bulb, but he probably would trip, and break the light bulb. But, he's starting to look better each fight. I mean, he looked great against Josh Parisian. Now, again, it's Josh Parisian, so pump the brakes a little bit. But, I mean, he thrashed the guy. You mentioned it, the guy's massive, huge guy. His output on the feet is really good for a heavyweight, really aggressive. He throws combinations. You mentioned he's not a power puncher. especially enough heavy. Now, obviously, when you're tipping the scales of 265, you're gonna have some power. But I mean, he's not Francis Ngannou clocking guys. Though I think he hits harder than I first credited him with, because he was hurting Parisian. He still has some defensive holes when he stands with his chin really high, but he's been moving his head a lot better than when he first joined the UFC, slipping and ripping. He gets to the clinch and he really can grind. He's very physically strong. You can tell, like, in the clinch, he's strong. I like his dirty boxing. He beat the shit out of Chris Barnett with knees. I like that he started adding takedowns against Josh Parisian, which, was what kind of thing about him, like, oh, he can't wrestle.
He could knee Chris Barnett in the face without taking his foot off the ground.
Yeah.
He's kind of went on his tiptoe and like.
He's got 3 subs on his record, including he hit a Kimura on Josh Parisian in his last fight, which is, say what you want. A Kimura is a hard sub to get anyways, but doing it against a heavyweight, grabbing a heavyweight and just yanking his arm like that. And he's got really good cardio for heavyweight. So heavyweight's such a weak division that I see top 10 upside this guy if he continues. Gaziev, of course, the guy's also a massive dude. He's got to cut weight to make the weight limit. He's beaten, like you mentioned, he hasn't been the best quality guy. So it is a little, take his record for what it's worth. But some of the things I've liked what I've seen, he throws straight shots down the pipe. He's got huge power. He touches, and guys crumble. He can wrestle, good top control. What I like is defensive position on top. Heavyweights don't do that. Fabricio Verdum does that. Now, I'm not calling Fabricio Verdum, so relax.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah, he's got mean ground and pound. He's got 3 subs on his record, including his last match. No, the one thing I didn't like, he went against an overmatched guy. At one point, he had his back taken in a weird scramble. He dropped the guy, and then he somehow, seconds later, he had his back taken, which I don't like that. And in that fight you talked about when he won a split decision, he really slowed down late in that fight. I think it's a solid matchup. I actually love it because I don't know who's going to win. I was surprised by the odds. I actually thought Gaziev, being the undefeated fighter, with all these knockouts, I expected him to be the favorite. And I wouldn't be surprised if people see those knockouts and kind of people's opinion on Buday hasn't changed than what, when he first came in the UFC. I could see maybe those odds changing or getting closer. I think Buday's a tough test for anybody. I feel the early portion of the fight favors Gaziev. If someone wins quick, easy, it's Gaziev. And he knocks out Buday, man, we're talking, he knocks a guy out in the first round. We're really excited about it. But the deeper the fight goes, the more I start feeling, leaning towards Buday. I originally thought I was taking an upset. I thought I was going with Buday, and I was going to say he weathers the storm and takes over with volume, and this is going to be a big upset, and kind of pump the brakes on this scary Russian who used to train with Khabib and his team. But apparently, Buday's the favorite. So I think Gaziev's going to slow down, and I think Buday's going to take over. And I actually think I think he's going to finish. I think he's going to continue to improve and go up my scale. Give me Buday by 3rd round TKO. With just volume striking.
All right. So put me firmly in the camp of people that haven't really changed their perception of Martin Buday too much. And maybe Keith is on this train before I am, and I've got a lesson to learn on Saturday. We head now to the featherweight division for a matchup between Andre Fili and Lucas Almeida. Fili, the 33-year-old Californian, is 22-10 with 1 no contest overall. He is 10-9 with 1 no contest across a 10-year now career in the UFC. He did lose his last time out, dropped a unanimous decision to Nathaniel Wood at the UFC London card in July. Prior to that, he had not fought since last September, where he won a split decision over Bill Algeo. He has actually more or less alternated wins and losses for the last several years. He'll be hoping to get back into the win column here against Almeida. Almeida, 32-year-old Brazilian, is 14-2 overall. He's 1-1 in the UFC since joining as a veteran of Season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. He actually lost there to Daniel Zellhuber, won one more fight in Jungle Fight, and then got the call up to the UFC, where he won his debut against Mike Trezano last June, came back this June, and got tapped out in the 2nd round by Pat Sabatini. So he'll be looking to get back in the win column. He is not favored to do so. Fili is your moderate favorite at -175. Almeida +145 on the comeback. Keith, we just talked about Randy Brown, where it's hard to believe that he's 33 already, but then you look and he has like 17 fights in the UFC. This is Andre Fili's 21st fight in the UFC. He's been in promotion for a decade, and sometimes it feels like he should be 39, and then other times it feels like he's just still the same, 23-year-old that came out of Tachi Palace fights and was just kind of this like wild, fun, scrambly brawler.
Yeah, some of that has to do because he dresses like he's friggin' 16. So
yeah, and he's got just kind of that. He just has kind of a young energy to him. He's just kind of a silly dude. His nickname is Touchy Feely. 33-year-old man. Almeida, despite being the younger guy, definitely a little more of the solid, somber, professional demeanor to him. I'm not going to ask you about top 10 upside about either of these guys in the featherweight division. I mean, give me a break. But does Almeida have what it takes to maybe stick around for a surprisingly long time like Fili? Does he get it done against Fili here?
Well, that's really tough. I mean, ask me, will he stick around for like 20 more fights? That's a lot. But will he be in the UFC 2 years from now? That's a different kind of question. It's tough because I don't know where Fili stands because being that he's been in the UFC so long, he could lose it all overnight. And I know I say it all the time and I sound like a broken record, and that's what happens when you own 2 record players and only 1 record. You're going to keep saying the same stuff. But Fili, there's times I love this guy, and there's times I'm like, I don't know. He's just another guy. He will bring action. That's what I know. I think he's intelligent. He's a counter striker that can fight well out of both stances. He's well-rounded. He's pretty technical on the feet. He's got some fast hands. He works behind a good jab. He feints well to set up his power shots. He really is good at fading back and then countering. It's the kind of thing he does really well. He's got some pop, a little underrated pop there. Good kicking game. He loves that like Robert Whittaker dip into one side, high kick on the other side. He's a very solid wrestler. He needs to improve his top control. And that's always been the case. He isn't a submission threat, which has never been the case. And he struggles. He's a topside grappler. He struggles if he's got put onto his back. I go back to like Sadiq Yusuf, take him down. Bryce Mitchell took him down, but Bryce Mitchell does it to a lot of people if you're not, top of the division. My biggest concern with him is being with all this experience, it's so good to have experience at a young age, but then it gets to a point where, it goes from experience to miles. And you got to worry about his chin. I mean, he was knocked out quick by Joe Anderson Brito. He was dropped recently by Nathaniel Wood. And you wonder if that is going to be a trend that we see a lot more that we didn't see years ago. Now, Almeida's a big guy. He's not a great athlete, but he makes up for pressure. I mean, he's going to come. Now, he's a pressure counter striker. He's a decent boxer. He likes to slip and rip. He avoids strikes with L step in and small side stepping. When he's countering, he throws like a lot of shots. He throws, he doesn't just counter and throws one shot. He'll throw a combination. Really good power. He's a Muay Thai clinch fighter. Like he'll get in there and he'll work in there. He can wrestle. I'd say he's an above average wrestler, but he's a weak defensive wrestler. He does have 4 subs on his record, but he was quickly subbed by Pat Sabatini in his last fight. But Pat Sabatini is a bit of a takedown subject kind of specialist. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a fun scrap. I mean, Fili's always in a fun fight, and Almeida's the same way based on their output. The chin of Fili really worries me, and this is the guy that could crack him. I mean, that's a part of Almeida's game is being a big puncher, but I'm still picking Fili. I see he has 2 avenues of victory. Like I could still see him, piecing him up on the feet, but he also I think he has the advantage in the wrestling. And we've seen him wrestle a lot. We've seen him go for takedowns, win rounds. He's smart that way. I see Fili really as just landing big shots. So I think Fili mixes in a takedown with a striking, and I think that's going to be the difference in the fight. I think he's going to win a really close fight where he's just winning, close rounds, just being, showing his UFC experience in that. So give me Fili by unanimous decision.
Yeah, I can definitely see it going that way. And I like that you pointed out that Fili really has started leaning more on his wrestling, because I remember him, I want to say it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago at this point, saying in interviews that he wanted to get back to his roots, start wrestling more. He like, I was a wrestler before I was a striker or a grappler. And normally when MMA fighters make that kind of mission statement, I immediately dismiss it. They're either being intentionally deceptive or they're just not very realistic. But Fili apparently meant it, because he really has started using his wrestling more in the last couple of years. And that's rare for a fighter to do as they push into their 30s. As you will never hesitate to point out, wrestling is hard, and it gets harder the older you get, the older your knees get. If you've had knee injuries, it just gets harder and harder. I mean, we're going to be talking about Josh Emmett here in an hour or so. But Fili really has done it. If he does it on Saturday, that is definitely his best route to victory against Almeida. Or win or lose, it is the thing that will manage risk as best as possible for him, because he still does have some defensive lapses on the feet. Almeida hits really hard. And like you said, Fili's been in the UFC for 10 years now, 20 fights. He's been knocked out a few times, but even in fights where he wasn't knocked out, even in fights where he won, he's been rung up a few times. I am picking Almeida to hurt Fili at least enough times to win 2 rounds out of 3. I don't think we get a knockout here, but I could see a decision win for Almeida, where the difference is he hurts Fili and has him in trouble in 2 out of the 3 rounds, and the round where he doesn't, Fili wins it either on the feet or by wrestling Almeida. So I'm going to take Almeida in the moderate upset here. No changing of the guard. Fili will still be Fili. He'll alternate wins and losses for another 3 years. And I don't think it puts Almeida over any sort of hump, but I think he's going to have a good night at the office on Saturday.
Hey, real quick, guess how many takedowns Fili has in the UFC?
12.
33. Now, a lot of those might be mat returns,
sure,
and this and that, but that's a lot.
33.
And I made a mistake. I said that Sadiq Yusuf took him down. That was wrong. He took Sadiq Yusuf down 3 times. I don't know why that's in my notes.
Yeah, he took Sadiq Yusuf down. Mitchell definitely took him down several times. Never really had him in imminent danger of getting subbed, but just kind of had him reeling and on the defensive on the ground. But
this is going back a while ago, but he out-wrestled Dennis Bermudez. That's a good, that's, the guy who really out-wrestled would be Hakran Diaz, but at that time was not bad. But yeah, anyways.
No, I thought my guess of 12 was going to be a little low, but I was really just thinking of his last 6 or 8 fights, forgetting that, okay, he did actually wrestle early on. Just, he's made it more a part of his game recently.
He took Charles Jourdain down 5 times.
And see, that's your smart move right there. Don't let Charles Jourdain do Charles Jourdain things, because every second he's on the feet is a possible flying knee coming at your face.
Taking Dennis Bermudez down 4 times, that's impressive.
It definitely is. My pick's probably wrong. Next up on the UFC 296 undercard, it is a classic Dagestan versus Georgia matchup. No, the other Georgia, as Tagir Ulanbekov faces Cody Durden. Ulanbekov, the 32-year-old Dagestani, is 14-2 overall. He is 3-1 in the UFC. He's coming in to this fight off of a win. He tapped out Nate Maness in 2 minutes last November at the Rodriguez versus Lemos fight night. That allowed him to bounce back from his lone UFC loss, which was last March against Tim Elliott. He'll look to make it 2 in a row after his lengthy layoff here against Durden. Durden, 32-year-old Atlanta native, is 16-4-1 overall. He's 5-2-1 in the UFC. He's 5-2 at flyweight. He made a short notice debut in the UFC just a couple years ago, up a weight class against Chris Gutierrez, who last weekend's performance notwithstanding is a very good fighter. Since then, 5-2 at flyweight. He's on a 4-fight win streak, including stealing some up-and-coming prospect shine off of Jake Hadley in his most recent appearance, winning a unanimous decision over him back in August at UFC on ESPN, Sandhagen versus Font. Keith, your favorite is -170. Your underdog is +140. Who are they?
Ulanbekov's the favorite.
You are correct. Ulanbekov is the favorite, despite the lengthy layoff, despite Cody Durden's 4-fight win streak. Ulanbekov, a moderate favorite there. Do you agree? And do you think he is still? I mean, it's hard to call a 32-year-old guy
sure
a young gun, but
especially in that division.
Yeah, is he
especially
still
in that division? Yeah,
part of the future of that division?
This is a fantastic fight.
It sure is.
I love flyweights, and I mean, that's what I'm saying about this card, man. If you ask one of those questions that you like to ask a lot, is like, yo, what's your favorite fight on the bottom of, a prelim or something like that? I'd have a hard time. I mean, you know me, I always favor flyweights because it's going to be fun action. And I like both of these guys. I mean, Durden has really grown on me. I mean, he wasn't a guy that was like super high coming in, but man, the guy's a gamer. On the feet, high volume, constantly pressing the action, taking the ground. He loves to get in the pocket and unleash power shots. He's good at throwing first, then slipping, and then throwing third. I love that. I love his counter right hand. He throws tons of hooks trying to end the fight by power shots. He's got good power. I mean, he starts JP buys. He dropped Carl's motor in their fight. And I know those are like, those a little while ago, but in a flyweight, that's showing power, because not many flyweights can do that. He's got hard kicks. He's actually one of the guys who actually checks leg kicks, but he's a fantastic wrestler. He's relentless to get the fight to the ground. He chain wrestles together well. Good control. I mean, you mentioned the Chris Gutierrez fight. I mean, he took Chris Gutierrez back on taking a fight on short notice up a weight class and rode him out the entire round, and that's why he was a draw. He's got good ground and pound. I am worried about his submission defense. I mean, he's been subbed in his career a lot, but go back to his last fight against Jake Hadley. I mean, he showed how insanely tough he was to get out of an extremely deep armbar. I thought he was going to break his arm was going to broken, and just mentally strong to get out of that. And the dude's got cardio. Like, he's going to go hard all 15 minutes. Now, Ulanbekov, man, this guy's good too. I mean, he's long and lengthy. I mean, again, I'm going by what we last seen him. He's been out for a while, but long and lengthy, really good athlete. He moves well. Pressure striker with nice output. Pretty technically sound. He sets up his shots with feints well. He's accurate. Works behind a crisp jab. Follows with straight power shots. He also attacks with combos. I love that he does really well to kind of cut angles when attacking, so he's not coming always on the center line. Plus power. Though he's a tall guy. He stands tall too, which makes him a little bit of a large target. And he keeps his chin high in the air. But he's got good calf kicks, though he has some trouble checking leg kicks. I go back to the Bruno Silva fight. Bruno Silva had a lot of success against him kicking the legs. But if you remember that, Ulanbekov's leg gave out on him like very early in the fight, and he showed how mentally tough he was to dig deep and continue to press the action and take the fight from Bruno Silva, despite like basically fighting on one foot. He's a good, but not a great wrestler. I think he gets a little overrated in that sense because of where he's from,
and not just being from Dagestan, but being an Eagles MMA guy who came from Nurmagomedov.
The last name is Ulanbekov. It sounds like someone Bo Nickel be at the U23s.
Ding ding ding.
Yep. He likes to get inside. Well, I should say this: he's more of an inside upper body, get in the body locks, kind of take you down. He can shoot through your hips, but it's not he can do that, but he just. I haven't been floored with his wrestling, I should say. Now he's shown some good takedown defense himself, and he's good to get back up if he's taken down. But his control isn't that good. I mean, I go back to where he kept getting Tim Elliott down, and only to have Elliott pop right back up because Bekoff was off balance or scrambling and rolling. Now Tim Elliott like wrestling Tim Elliott is like wrestling like a grease pig. So I give it a little pat. It was like my my bachelor party. Wrestling two greased up strippers at the Foxy Lady, but make sure they cut that out. So I don't hear that.
We're not cutting that out. That's staying.
By the way, in a wrestling singlet, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, you might have to travel
to Dave Ferrier.
You might have to travel to Vegas midweek and go get Tim Elliott because he committed murder on Saturday. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I haven't got to watch it yet. I will watch it. I will watch this week. I've never missed a UFC fight ever in my life. I've seen every single UFC fight, even the dark ones from back in the day when they used to have to get them on the VCR and all that. But yeah, shout out to Nate Farrer, who showed up to my bachelor party at the Fox Later. It was whipped cream wrestling, and he showed up with an old high school wrestling singlet. Made me wear it.
That's amazing.
That was a good night. Anyways, he has 6 career submission. How do I go back to that? 6 career sub wins.
Seven now with Nate Maness. Yeah, he's up to 7.
Oh, he hit. I'm sorry. 7. He hit Nate Maness with that standing guillotine. He has some good cardio. I mean, he pushed hard in close fights. Bruno Silva, Alan Nascimento, Tim Elliott. I mean, he matched their cardio. Those are 3 good wins. So I think this is a tremendous fight. And to me, it comes down to Durden's reckless abandon pressure versus Ulanbekov's just overall well-rounded skills. I think Ulanbekov is a better striker. If it's a distance striking match, he's going to have his way. If it's in close and it's a battle, I don't know. Durden's got some dog in him, and he's got this self-belief, and he won't back down. I like his cardio. I like his takedowns. I like that he's, if he's taken down, he's going to keep the fight moving. Ulanbekov's getting a little up there in age. I think we have a hell of a fight on our hands. I think both guys are going to have moments. I think both guys are going to land shots. I think after the fight, I'm not going to feel worse about either guy. I think Durden's going to pull the upset. Give me Durden by split decision and one of the best fights of the night.
Yep, it's 2 for 2. I kind of starred this one, put a little asterisk by it in my mind as I was prepping for this because I like Durden in this as well. And while there are certain unknowns here with Ulanbekov coming back after 14, almost 15, 14 months off, I favor Durden slightly if Ulanbekov is no worse for wear. And for all we know, he won't be the same guy. This is the ultimate speed kills division. If he slipped at all, that only favors Durden more. But yeah, I like Durden for all the reasons that you mentioned. And there was no way to see this coming. He has 8 UFC fights right now. In his first 4, I mean, he had a pretty admirable performance in defeat against Chris Gutierrez. He got highlight reeled by Jimmy Flick. He beat Al-Richi Lang and said a bunch of ignorant stuff afterwards and then got run over by Muhammad Mokaev in like a minute. There was nothing about this guy that said he'd be on the cusp of the top 15 18 months later. Like the Mokaev win was like barely 18. Mokaev loss was barely like 18 months ago. He's won 4 fights since then, and he's just kind of moved up. You mentioned JP Bays, Carlos Mota, not the best wins, but Charles Johnson is a tough out. Jake Hadley is a guy that had been kind of starred as part of the future of the division, and Durden stole that. Here, yeah, Ulanbekov is a tall, rangy guy who excels when he's allowed to dictate the distance, but I don't think Durden's going to let him. I think Durden's going to crowd him, even though he's just as big as Ulanbekov. I think he's going to want to be in his face, stay in boxing range, maybe stay where he can clinch with him. If he can avoid some of Ulanbekov's kind of more Sambo influence takedowns in the clinch, I think that's going to be a good place for him to do damage. And I like him to get stronger as the fight goes along, because even though he's a big guy for the division and willing to fight at a pretty furious pace, he's shown definitively that he has 5 rounds or 3 rounds of cardio. I mean, he's 5 and 2 at flyweight, and all 5 times he's gone 4 times he's gone the distance, he's won. Yeah, give me Durden to win, probably 2 rounds to 1 in an absolute barn burner here. Yet another, it's going to be a crowded podium for fight of the night. I hope this just ends up being one of those cards where like every finisher gets a bonus, and there's only one great fight that goes the distance, and so they can get fight of the night. That's what I'm hoping. I want these guys to have a little extra in their stockings. The ultra-loaded UFC 296 undercard powers on with a light heavyweight matchup between Alonzo Menifield and Dustin Jacoby. Menifield, the 36-year-old Dallas-Fort Worth native, is 14-3-1 overall. He is 7-3-1 since joining the UFC as a 2-time winner on Dana White's Contender Series. He won on Season 1 and Season 2. Knockouts both times. The second knockout took only 8 seconds. I guess that was enough to get him the contract. And since then, he's had a pretty impressive run, and he's on a 4-fight unbeaten streak. He just finished a back-to-back series with Jim Crute that took up his entire 2023. Drew with him in February, came back and tapped him out with a guillotine choke of all things in July in their rematch. He will look to make it 2 wins in a row, extend his unbeaten streak to 5 at the expense of Jacoby. Jacoby, 35-year-old Chicago native by way of Colorado. He is 19-7-1 overall. He's 7-4-1 in the UFC overall, but that includes 2 early career losses. He washed out of the UFC, went to several other promotions, including Bellator, where he also went 0-2, went back to kickboxing, became a Glory kickboxing contender. In fact, he fought for the Glory light heavyweight title against Michel Pereira. But since being back in the UFC, he has been a pleasant surprise, to say the least. He's 7-2-1 since rejoining out of season 4 of Dana White's Contender Series. He's coming in off a win. He knocked out Kennedy Zechikwu back in August in a minute and a half. That allowed him to get back on track after back-to-back losses to Khalil Roundtree and Azamat Mirzakhanov. Odds here heavily favor Jacoby. He is -250, Menifield +200. Keith, on the face of it, this is 2 kickboxers with big power. Do you see it as anything more nuanced than that, or is this just going to be a striker's delight? And who do you see winning?
No, I think there's more to it. I mean, Menifield won his last fight by submission, you know, and we've seen Jacoby wrestle a little bit, not often, but he'll I shouldn't say he didn't wrestle a little, but he did mixed martial arts. I mean, I could see a little bit of some ground going on, and especially if Menifield's the one pressing the action. Menifield, I'm surprised with the lines that this heavy after Menifield's last performance. He looked really good in this last fight. He's a good athlete. He moves well. He fights behind a high guard defense. Likes to work from distance. Beautiful right counter. He has serious power. I mean, we saw him blast Misha Serkinov. We saw him hurt Jimmy Crute back-to-back fights a lot. He will often look for the perfect blow. He can telegraph his shots a little bit, load up on everything. And when he overthrows his shots, he leaves himself to be countered. He also tends to fight in spurts, which is a way to kind of conserve his energy because he throws so much. But he's got a good kicking game. He strong calf kicks. He's got very quick high kicks for a guy of his size. He's not much of an offensive wrestler. He's not going to look get the fight to the ground, but he was historically a really bad defensive wrestler, but he's improved. I mean, he stuffed takedowns from Devin Clark, Misha Serkinov, Jimmy Crute, all recently. And his grappling has come a long way. I mean, he caught Jimmy Crute in a guillotine in his last fight. And I think his cardio has come a long way too. I mean, we haven't seen him like totally gas out like he used to. Jacoby's a kickboxer that's very technically sound on the feet, high volume, stays very relaxed, good footwork. He parries punches well. He uses feints well to set up his strikes. I love that he's always attacking from different angles, cuts angles well when he's on his offense. Great jab, clean, follow-up strikes down the pipe. Doesn't really waste energy, just touches and unloads when there's an opening. But he has power. I mean, we saw him. You saw his power against Donald Jones. We saw his last fight against Kennedy and Chukwu. I like his calf kicks. I mean, it's been a while, but I go back to the Justin Ledet fight where he beat Justin Ledet just like throwing calf kicks. Now, I am worried about his chin. I mean, he did get hurt by Mirzakhanov in their fight. Wasn't reacting to shots well, which is concerning. And as far as getting the ground, he never really looks for takedowns. And defensively, he's a weaker defense wrestler. So if the fight goes to the ground, I probably favor Menifield. It has a matchup by 2 guys that I would say when they first joined the UFC, I didn't think they were that good. And both have really drastically improved. Now there's still some holes in their game, but they've looked much better. I'm going to go with Jacoby. I think he's the better striker. I think he's more technical. I will take technique over power, but not a lot of confidence. I think the line should be a little bit closer. I think both will have their moments, but I say Jacoby takes over later. I think I'm going to say he gets a late finish too. I'll say Jacoby wins by 3rd round TKO.
Yeah, I like the breakdown there. On the face of it, yeah, Menifield has the frightening power, but Jacoby definitely a more diverse striker, more disciplined striker, going to have a substantial advantage in height and reach. They're both good calf kickers. It'll be interesting to see how that battle plays out because both of them like to throw low kicks more than they like to check them. I mean, you mentioned Jacoby has literally finished a fight in the UFC with nothing but leg kicks, kind of like a light heavyweight Pat Barry or something. And Menifield, on the one hand, it doesn't look great on paper that he couldn't get 41-year-old Ed Herman out of there, but on the other hand, Herman might still be limping from that fight. That thing could have been stopped as a mercy stoppage just from all the damage he did to Herman's legs. Menifield used to be mystifying. Like, he's the guy that blew away Paul Craig, just heard him, jumped on him, and never gave him a chance to do the Paul Craig thing, but then gassed out and lost to Devin Clark just strictly by getting too tired. Had like frustrating performances against Herman and Knight, but then since then he's come back and looked fantastic. Yeah, Askar Mozharov was terrible, but he blew away Misha Serkinov. He looked really good in back-to-back fights with Jim Crute. He's 36, so even at light heavyweight, he doesn't have all the time in the world, but he seems like a guy who's fighting the best he ever has right now. And unfortunately, this just isn't a great matchup for him to show it. I could see Jacoby definitely getting a stoppage late if he wears on Menifield, if he wins whatever leg kick battle there is. But even if Jacoby doesn't turn on the Jets late and finish him, I could see him just managing the distance, keeping himself out of range for Menifield to land, one of his huge body kicks or head kicks or one of his huge overhands. I could see Jacoby just using his superior footwork to keep him, on the outside, jab him up, kick his legs. Give me Jacoby to frustrate Menifield over the course of 3 rounds, but I wouldn't be too shocked if you're right and he really starts piling up the damage and gets a late stoppage. Next up on the UFC 296 prelims, it is royalty as Casey King O'Neill takes on Ariane, the Queen of Violence, Lipski. O'Neill, 26-year-old Scot by way of Australia, is 9-1 as a professional. She's 4-1 in the UFC. Her lone loss came in her last appearance. She came back from a year injury layoff and dropped a unanimous decision to Jennifer Maia. That was back in March at UFC 286. She had been scheduled to fight in September against Viviane Araujo. She ended up pulling out of that with another injury. That gets her return gets pushed back to December, and her opponent gets changed from Araujo to Lipski. Lipski, the 29-year-old Brazilian, is 16-8 overall. She is an even 5-5 since joining the UFC as the outgoing KSW flyweight champ. She's on a 2-fight win streak. Since getting knocked silly by Priscilla Cachoeira a little over a year ago, she has back-to-back decision wins over JJ Aldrich and Melissa Gatto. The most recent of those, the Gatto fight, was in July at UFC on ESPN, Strickland versus Magomedov. So she'll look to go 3-0 in the UFC in calendar year 2023. She is not favored to do so, however, as O'Neill is minus 190, Lipski plus 150. Keith, Casey O'Neill came to the UFC along with the rest of that kind of bumper crop of young women in their early 20s that dropped into the UFC within the last 2 or 3 years. She came along a little behind Macy Barber, but with, Miranda Maverick, Aaron Blanchfield. Manon Fior is a few years older, but, she has some of that same young prospect feel just because her professional career has been so short. And I wouldn't have called you crazy if you said O'Neill had the best upside of all of them. She just has different level of physicality than some of them.
Yep.
Like the physicality and build of Manon Fior with some of the meanness and killer instinct of Barber. She seemed to have it all, and she's been kept on the shelf for most of the last 2 years with a variety of knee injuries, and in between she has one appearance and it's her one professional loss, though it's to a very good fighter in Jennifer Maia. I think the onus is on O'Neill to kind of prove here that she's still the future of the division, and I think she was done a favor. I don't know what the line would have been, but there's every chance she would have been an underdog to Viviane Araujo, a recent title challenger, if they had fought back in September.
Sure.
Here, she gets still an opponent with good name value and one that it's going to matter if she beats her, but probably an easier stylistic matchup because Lipski also fancies herself a striker, even if her ground game has actually been her most effective route to victory in her UFC run. And she feels like an old 29. Like Lipski, when she arrived in the UFC, she was in her early 20s. She was a walking highlight reel coming out of KSW, and she disappointed enormously early on. In fact, if she'd been anyone other than Ariane Lipski, a respectable champ from KSW and just, let's say, a very marketable fighter, there's possibility she would have been cut. She's turned the corner, but she's winning fights now in a way that it's hard to call her the queen of violence. Unless O'Neal is seriously slowed by these multiple injuries, if she's a ghost of the fighter that she was, in the Shevchenko and Modafferi fights, I think this is a favorable matchup for her. She's taller, has better reach than Lipski. While Lipski's ground game is good, O'Neal, I think, is a better pure grappler and has meaner ground and pound. So I see this as a good bounce back fight for O'Neal. This is one where she can really get and either put away or get an overwhelming decision win type performance over a fighter who's, on a 2-fight win streak herself. I think that's what's going to happen here. Give me O'Neal to just kind of put Lipski through the meat grinder on the feet. If things go to the ground, I think it'll probably be because O'Neal initiated it. And that matters because who ends up on top on the ground is going to matter a lot here. Lipski has a better top game than bottom game. And O'Neal, again, mean on top. So I actually think she might finish this thing. Give me O'Neal by third round TKO on the ground after winning the first 2 rounds. But this is all me assuming that she's no worse for wear after the big injury, after the Modafferi fight, and then the injury that forced her out of the Araujo fight in September. Assuming she's still Casey O'Neal, I think she rolls over Lipski.
Yeah, I think this is the appropriate matchup, though. I think having a returning, taking on like someone like Araujo, I don't think that's the, you don't have to rush this girl. Like, make sure she's healthy. Give her a test. Obviously, this is the test, but doesn't have to be as high up the rankings. I mean, I looked at her fight against Jennifer Maia, and she didn't look good in that fight, but it was closer than I remembered. Like, I thought she got blown out, and she lost. It was clearly she lost, but she was only 26. She's coming off an injury, and that's not a bad name to have a loss to early in her career. What I like about her, she's got good volume. I mean, she crushed Antonina Shevchenko, Roxana Modafferi with just her pressure, just marching them down. She's got fast hands. She's a Muay Thai striker where she's got pretty decent pop. She does need to improve her defense. She's very hittable. She keeps her chin high in the air. But she's well-rounded. She can take the fight to the ground. She's a strong wrestler. She chains takedowns together well. Good top control. Fierce ground and pound. I mean, go back to like the Shannon Dobson fight. She beat Shannon Dobson to a pulp with just her ground and pound. And she's a submission threat. I mean, she subbed Laura Procopio. How do you say her name?
Yeah.
Ariane Lipski, I have no clue about her. Like, I was just ready to give up on her, and then she's looked really good in back-to-back fights against JJ Aldridge and Melissa Gatto. She's a pressure striker with high volume. I'd say a serviceable boxer, pretty quick hands, but not a power hitter. She kind of lacks power, despite dropping Mandy Baum in a fight. But she got a good kicking game. Now she wants to move forward. She can't handle pressure. She can't be bullied. I mean, we saw Miss Priscilla Catchaway just run right through her. If she gets to the clinch, I like her there. I mean, she's good offensive clinch game. She's starting to show some offensive wrestling. She got takedowns against JJ Aldridge, got takedowns against Melissa Gatto. She showed some improved takedown defense against JJ Aldridge. No, I'm not confident in her wrestling. Like, I'm not feeling good about it. She's still got to wrestle by Antonina Shevchenko.
Made Antonina Shevchenko look like Valentina, as you said it at the time.
Yeah, no, I don't care what she does. She can go to the next Olympics and win. I'm still going to bring up that she got out wrestled by Antonina Shevchenko. She does have 3 subs on her record. I'm with you. I mean, at this point, this is the fight. I definitely think Lipski's a tougher test than I would have thought a year ago. But I'm going to go with O'Neal. I mean, she has more volume of feet. She brings the pressure. That's something that Lipski hasn't been able to handle. She hits harder. She should have a massive advantage on the ground. I say she gets some takedowns. I think she batters on the ground. I say O'Neal gets it done early. I'm with you. I like a TKO. I'm gonna say she does in the second round. I'm gonna say she gets on top and she starts laying down some mean ground and pound. I'm gonna say she wins by second round TKO from ground and pound.
We head now to the men's bantamweight division for a matchup between Cody Garbrandt and Brian Kelleher. Garbrandt, the 32-year-old Ohio native, is 13-5 overall. He is 8-5 in the UFC. He is, of course, the former bantamweight champ. That was a long time ago, however, just a little over 7 years ago that he had his eye-opening performance against Dominic Cruz at UFC 207. Since winning the title from Cruz, he is 2-5. It's been some rough sledding and a precipitous fall from grace for the man once minted as a potential future divisional great. He is coming off a win. He took a unanimous decision over Trevin Jones at UFC 285 in March. That allowed him to bounce back from back-to-back losses to Rob Font, and I apologize, that wasn't a knockout. His 5 losses, that's 4 KOs and 1 decision. And then his one-off fight at flyweight where Kai Kara-France showed him the error of his ways, knocked him out in the first round. Garbrandt looking to make it 2 wins in a row here and reestablish himself, if not as a contender, at least as a viable presence in the division he once ruled. He'll have to get through Kelleher to do it. Kelleher, 37-year-old New Yorker, 24-14 overall. 8-7 since joining the UFC as the former Ring of Combat bantamweight champ. He's on a 2-fight losing streak, both of them first-round submission losses to Umar Nurmagomedov and Mario Bautista. Prior to that, he had won 2 in a row over Domingo Pilarte and Kevin Kroom, but we're talking about 2.5, 3 years ago at that point. So Kelleher definitely in need of some redemption here if he wants to keep being even the kind of entertaining mid-card guy that he seemed to be settling into being. He is not favored to do so. Garbrandt, strong favorite at -220, Kelleher plus 170 on the comeback.
Wow.
All right. I tell you this, obviously huge question marks about Cody Garbrandt. He went from the hottest fighter in the sport 7 years ago. Coming off his win over Dominic Cruz. Again, that was December 2016, so 7 years ago. He might not have been the top pound-for-pound fighter in the sport, but he was in the top 10, and he was 25 years old.
Yeah.
He had just embarrassed the greatest bantamweight of all time.
It was one of those performances in a title fight that, you put it in the short list of like, holy shit. You think Conor McGregor knocking out Jose Aldo one punching him.
Sure.
I think Anderson Silva on Rich Franklin.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's other one, but that was one of those moments where it was just like, wow. Like it was so incredibly impressive.
And perhaps more impressive because it was a 5-round blanking. It wasn't catching Cruz with one huge punch. It was
wasn't a big it was a thrashing.
Yeah. And he fell off a cliff immediately. The back-to-back fights with Dillashaw, obviously, Dillashaw was A, a great fighter, and B, roided out of his mind. But since then, it all seemed to abandon Garbrandt really quickly, and he became the world's oldest 27-year-old, just it seemed like overnight. Like a guy who no longer had the chin to win the kind of fights he favored. Because Garbrandt's whole thing is, explosive athlete, huge power for the division, always a little bit hittable, but the main problem was that whenever he got hit cleanly, he'd bite down on the mouth guard and just get into a firefight, and all of a sudden he couldn't abide that anymore. Like Pedro Munoz flattened him in a fight where Garbrandt had been doing pretty well. Garbrandt has won a couple fights since then. He beat Trevin Jones, a guy that does have power, just by fighting in a little more composed fashion. maybe remembered that he was once upon a time a college wrestler who, quit wrestling in college for reasons other than he couldn't wrestle. I don't know at 32 how much future he has, but if he doesn't get past Kelleher, he's not long for the UFC. He's the kind of guy, and I said this about Miesha Tate a couple weeks ago, his name value and his purses are such that they can't just stick him in as fodder for a guy making 10-10 or 12-12 off the Contender Series. The UFC is going to decide that the juice isn't worth the squeeze if Garbrandt can't beat some decent fighters. Kelleher is the kind of guy that he should be able to. I mean, even though he's from New York, I'll never forget Sherdog associate editor Jay Petrie calling Brian Kelleher a Boston-style face-first striker. For a guy that actually has more submission than knockout wins, he's a guy that wants to come forward and brawl. He's not big for the division. He's not a great athlete, but he's gotten a lot done against more athletic, bigger, more skilled fighters just by being incredibly tough, applying constant forward pressure. He's always coming forward and swinging, forcing his opponent to do something, or you're going to lose this round. And then while he's not a great wrestler, he's at home, or up until recently was at home in scrambles and was able to come out in advantageous positions or snatch submissions out of nowhere. He just the kind of guy that was going to stick around the UFC for 20 or 25 fights, grab a few bonuses here and there, and just make a nice little nest egg for himself. But in back-to-back fights now with Nurmagomedov and Bautista, granted both those are really good fighters, he's been tapped out in the first round, and he looks to be slowing quickly. If Garbrandt is... the Garbrandt who beat Trevin Jones should be able to hurt Kelleher badly on the feet, maybe knock him out. Maybe we see a return of the old kind of brick-fisted Garbrandt. Or if things go to the ground, Garbrandt's ground game has always been more underused than underrated. He could certainly, take top position on Kelleher, start punching him, and maybe tap him out. I think Kelleher is an old 37 and getting older quickly. This is kind of set up for Garbrandt to get some measure of redemption here. Unless he's really, really washed, I think he gets it done here. Give me Garbrandt by, I'm going to say first round knockout, but if it turns into a submission, first round club and sub, and Kelleher ends up with 3 first round submission losses in a row, that wouldn't be too shocking either. But yeah, give me Garbrandt to get a spectacular win that will probably get, the UFC will start talking about him like he's back. He's not back. He's just back enough to beat Brian Kelleher on Saturday.
Yeah, it'd be the worst thing happened to him.
Well, it'll be one of the press conferences where I think I can make a run at the title.
Yeah,
I can fight for 5 more years because that's Garbrandt.
And then just see him get absolutely slaughtered by a guy like Mario Batista.
Yeah.
To me, Cody Garbrandt is always one of those what ifs. I don't think he gets talked enough. Like people always talk about him getting caught on the chin with TJ Dillashaw, and I don't think the back surgery has been talked about enough because right after he won that title, he was out for a really long time, had back surgery, and was never the same fighter. And I heard DC talk about back surgery and never feeling the same again, and Tito Ortiz saying the same thing. That is always worried about what I wondered about Cody Garbrandt. He's athletic, but he's not as explosive as he once was. When you watch his recent, he's still pretty light on the feet. He moves well still. Mm-hmm. A lot of feints, but his output has dropped. He can't pull the trigger. He seems like his last fight, he was fighting to not get knocked out, which I guess happens if you keep getting knocked out. He's still got a pretty good jab. It's got tight boxing. He can crack. You mentioned it, he can't take a shot anymore. It seems like everyone knocks him out, and he makes matters worse because when he has this ego that he can't turn down a pocket brawl, and he always trying to equal the score when he gets caught with a shot. Now you talk about his wrestling. He's a decent wrestler. He's got good entries. We saw some of his wrestling against Trevin Jones. Very reactionary when his opponents overpursue. I love that reshot he did on Dominic Cruz in their fight. It was, he had everything. It was a perfect performance. It was, he's got some strong takedown defense, good at scrambling back to his feet. but he's been out for so long, man. I don't even know if that's. I want it to be true. I want Cody Garbrandt to be good.
Sure.
Like he's a fun character like that. That like off the wall can go from 0 to 100 on an instant. The littlest thing, like when he snatched up T.J. Dillashaw by the throat on the show, or when like Conor McGregor's talking shit with Uriah Faber and like Cody Garbrandt jumps in and pushes him and stuff. Like I love that.
And the division is a more interesting place with him there. I imagine if he weren't on this kind of losing streak. He's 32 years old. Imagine if he was in a position where fights with people like O'Malley and Merab were even feasible.
Exactly.
Like what the talk would be like.
Oh yeah, but he's got into it with O'Malley anyways.
Yeah.
I mean, how about a rematch with Dominic Cruz right now if he won? You know, how fun that'd be. I always think about when, Dominic Cruz could, he could talk circles around anybody, but it was fun, their pre-fight talk and all that stuff. And even the Dillashaw rivalry was fun. People, I've said it before, I do this preview show because I just love watching fights. I love digging in. I love getting deep. But what I root for is the funnest thing to talk about during the recap show. And Cody Garbrandt win is the funnest thing. Nothing against Brian Kelleher, but I mean, he's 37-year-old card filler. That's what he's been. Yeah. Nothing against the guy. The guy's done really well for a guy that I didn't think he would even make it to the UFC. Mm-hmm. But he's not a former world champion. And a former world champion winning is the best thing for the UFC. Yeah. Now, Kelleher, I mean, I'm worried, like you said, I'm worried what we got. But he's 37 years old, hasn't fought in a year and a half. Like, I don't expect him to be better than he was a year and a half ago. His losses, you mentioned, they were tough loss, and they were quick. He struggled, but they're two really good guys. So I'll, leave that there. He's well rounded. No major flaw in his game other than being a minus athlete. He's not a great athlete, but he's a technically sound boxer. He's got some high volume. He's a good counter striker. He uses feints to draw out his attacks. I'd say plus power. But due to his athleticism, he'll struggle with people who has got good speed. I mean, you look at the fight against Batista, wasn't long, but like he was struggling with the speed of Batista. Mm-hmm. He doesn't check leg kicks. He kind of sits on his punches. That's what happens. He's not an explosive wrestler, but he's crafty enough to get the fight to the canvas, and he's got a strong mindset to get the fight to the ground. He defends takedowns by often jumping guillotine, which is bad. But to his credit, he's got a really good guillotine. Like he's tapped some guys with that, but he isn't a grappling specialist. I mean, he got quickly subbed in back-to-back fights. So I think the betting lines are off. I think it should be much closer. I don't think Garbrandt should be a 2-1 favorite against regional guys at this point. Like, I wouldn't have any confidence betting on him. I expect him to come out wrestle heavy because we saw it in his last fight, and he might be trying to protect that chin. Fuck. I don't want to pick either guy. I keep picturing the same thing. I picture everything going right for Garbrandt, everything, until suddenly it's not. And Kelleher just catches him with something, catches him with a punch. Garbrandt slows down in the third and he catches him with a shot, or he jumps on a guillotine or something. And that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to say Kelleher catches him in the third round. I'm going to say Kelleher by third round TKO.
Second from the top of the UFC 296 undercard is a women's bantamweight matchup between Irene Aldana and Karol Rosa. Aldana, the 35-year-old Mexican, is 14-7 overall. She is 7-5 in the UFC. She most recently fought back in June in a bid to take the bantamweight title from Amanda Nunes. She came out on the wrong end of a 5-round decision where it felt even more lopsided than the scorecards would indicate, as she essentially failed to pull the trigger and was kind of toyed with by the champ for most of 5 rounds. Prior to that, she'd been on a 2-fight win streak, both finishes over Macy Chasson and Yana Santos. So she'll look to get back in the win column, reestablish herself as a top contender in the division and maybe a future champ in the post-Nunes era. And she'll need to get through Rosa to do it. Rosa, 28-year-old Brazilian, is 17-5 overall. She is 6-2 in the UFC. She's coming in off a win. She took a split decision over Santos at UFC on ESPN, Strickland versus Magomedov back in July. Prior to that, she had a one-off fight at featherweight where she dropped a unanimous decision to Norma Dumont. So she's decided that her best future lies at 135, and she's looking to stake her claim to contender position in the now wide open division. Odds here, your favorite is -190. Your underdog is +160. Keith, who are they?
I'll say Aldana is the favorite.
You are correct. Aldana is the favorite. I'm not surprised by that. On one hand, I'm a little surprised that she's not a bigger favorite, since Aldana's looked sensational against people not named Amanda Nunes recently, but maybe the Nunes fight was so dispiriting that people are wondering if, like, I don't like to use this term, but if something mentally broke in Aldana, I wonder if that's kind of the thought process behind the bettors that have kind of pushed the line here. But
well, Rosa's coming off a good win too.
Rosa's
on paper, on paper at least.
She's coming off a good win on paper, but I'm not saying this is going to be the case forever. We are still talking about a 28-year-old fighter, though. I mean, she's going to turn 29 in a couple weeks. But at this point, I just don't think Rosa's that great. I think I assumed she was better than she was, or looked at her performances in a more positive light, just because she comes from that Parana Vale Tudo cookie cutter, where they're all kind of different size versions of the Jessica Andrade cookie cutter, but maybe she's the cyborg of Parana Vale Tudo. And I don't mean cyborg Chris Cyborg. I mean Evangelista Cyborg, where you had all the shoot box guys in the early 2000s. You had, Vanderlei and Shogun. And Cyborg, I mean, he looked like them. He had the same basic style, just wild swinging Brazilian who, surprisingly nifty when the fight went to the ground, but just wasn't as good as they were.
You got to be an apple dude if you marry Chris Cyborg.
Yeah.
Like, you got to be a manly. Now, listen, I'm not one of those people who call Chris Cyborg ugly. It looks like Vanderlei Silva's. I don't like that. I've met her many times. She's a very nice woman. So I'm not insulting her. I mean, she's a fucking savage. That's what I mean by that.
Yeah, of course. No, like, Chris Cyborg is awesome, dude. She's
I love her.
Yeah, cool, intelligent.
I met her. She's such a nice lady.
Yeah, and thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness. Yeah.
But
she kicked my ass.
Yeah, but Karol Rosa, so far, it's just not there. Like, she's big for the division. I mean, she moved up to 145, and she didn't lose to Norma Dumont because she was undersized. She's one of the women at bantamweight that feels like she'd do just fine if she moved up, but she's still hittable on the feet. She's not as good a takedown artist as you'd think she would be. For as big as she is, she doesn't always win clinch exchanges, even against like smaller like fighters that aren't really clinch specialists. She is turning a bit of a corner, like the wins over Lena Landsberg and Yana Santos, even though both of them are very much on the tail end of their career. She was able to kind of leverage her physicality and beat up on women who used to be the clinch monsters of the division. But here, I don't think she's going to have the chance to. Unless Aldana really is damaged goods between the ears after the Amanda Nunes experience, Aldana is going to be much taller, a good outside boxer with decent footwork. I think this will be the kind of bull versus matador fight where Aldana is chopping her up with her jab, probably landing kicks from outside. Rosa's going to come running at her on straight lines. Aldana's going to get out of the way. If they do clinch, Aldana is surprisingly sturdy there. I think Aldana just kind of wins a one-sided decision here where Rosa's probably tired, beat up by the end, and just looking very frustrated. I think I don't know if Aldana is going to be UFC champ this time next year, but if she gets past Rosa the way I think she does, she's way up there in the field for me. I think she's still one of the best women in a currently bad division.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about coming off a loss like she did against Amanda Nunes, you don't think you should be close to a title shot, but being that way this division is, this could be like a title eliminator.
Yeah, I mean,
especially if Rosa wins, because new face kind of thing.
It's gonna have Rosa versus Raquel Pennington for the vacant title sometime next year.
Yeah, good lord. Aldana, she's a pressure striker. She marches down her foe. Though she needs to learn how to cut off the cage, she would do so much better. That's why she was chasing Holly Holm around and couldn't catch her. She struggled with her. She's a kickboxer with a high guard defense, throws 1-2s down the pipe. Pretty accurate. And all those things are set up. She's throwing 1-2s down the pipe because it's setting up that big left hook of hers. That's really dangerous. My biggest issue with her is that she lacks head movement, and I can tell it comes from like being a boxer and spending a lot of rounds boxing, where you can hide behind boxing gloves, where you don't have to move your head as much. Because she also tends to back straight up, which I don't like. But she got a good kicking game. I mean, she uses those long legs really well to win on the outside. She's not much of an offensive wrestler. She's definitely a weaker defensive wrestler. You go to like Holly Holm. Holly Holm took her down over and over again. I mean, even though that's a fight that she won, took her down a lot. I mean, Manny Nunes in the last fight. Manny Nunes does not get enough credit for how smart she is. Like, everyone talks about ferocious, but she in fights when she's going against people that she could probably just stand up and bang with them too, but that's their avenue of victory. She will close the distance and take them down. I mean, she did it. Who's that other woman there? Jermaine Duranomy. Mm-hmm. And she did it again with Irene Aldana. She turned into a takedown dummy. Aldana does have 3 subs on her record, so I like that. And she's on a hot team. Like, I'll say that. She's on a team that has continued to make huge improvements. So we could see a different fighter, being that she's been out for a while. Rosa, she's a minus athlete. I mean, it's the division to be a minus athlete in. You could still go, wait a minute, like a Raquel Pennington. Let me see. I'm not trying to dog Raquel Pennington, but she could win the title, and she's not a good athlete at all.
Oh, dude, if the UFC can find an excuse to, they'll put Miesha Tate in a title fight in that division next year.
She's not far off.
Yeah.
No one's far off.
Helping to make your point for you. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
She's not far off. She's big for the weight class. She's a bit of a brute. She fights flat-footed, stands a little too tall for my liking, but she's got good volume and she's got good accuracy. She's going to work behind a jab, throw 1-2s down the pipe. She can get a little wild and wing her overhands and telegraph her shots, but she's got good pop. She struggles with speed. I mean, I go back to like the Norma Dumont. Norma Dumont's not known for her speed. She's actually faster than she gets credit, but Norma Dumont was really like piecing her up with her speed. I like her calf kicks. She beat up Vanessa Mello with the calf kicks, Jocelyn Edwards, Betchkoya with calf kicks. She likes to grind, use her size in the clinch, and go back to like the Betchkoya fight. She had a lot of success in the clinch. She will wrestle, but she's not a great defensive wrestler. She's definitely more of a top side grappler, busy ground pound on top, but she struggles to get off the bottom. I go back to like Sarah McMahon. Sarah McMahon took her down and held her down. This really, to me, depends on where the range is for. I think it's a closer fight. Like, I think it's a little harder to pick than you're saying. If it's in the middle of the cage at distance, then Aldana should be too fast for her. Too fast, hits too hard, too long, too good of a striker just in general. Especially if she can keep her distance with her teep kicks. But if it's in close, Rosa can get inside and grind. Now, Aldana's big and strong too, but if she can get a takedown, make it a little messy, maybe get some time on top. I think where Rosa's going to want to take the fight. I mean, she had to watch the Manny Nunes fight and see what she did. But, like, Rosa's not a Manny Nunes, So I say she tries that. I say she struggles to get Aldana. I say she struggles to close the distance. I say Aldana uses her speed, her volume, her footwork, and picks apart Rosa from distance. Give me Aldana by decision.
The top fight on the UFC 296 undercard is a featherweight matchup between Josh Emmett and Bryce Mitchell. Emmett, the 38-year-old Californian, is 18-4 overall. He's 9-4 in the UFC. He has been a top contender for what feels like forever, but he is on the first 2-fight skid of his professional career, having dropped back-to-back fights against Yair Rodriguez and Ilia Topuria. The most recent of those, the Topuria fight, was in the headliner of UFC on ABC 5 in June. Emmett had been scheduled to face Giga Chikadze on this card. Chikadze withdrew with less than 2 weeks from fight night. In steps Mitchell. Mitchell 29-year-old Arkansas native is 16-1 overall. He is 7-1 since joining the UFC as a former semifinalist on season 27 of The Ultimate Fighter. He is coming in off of a win. He took a unanimous decision over Dan Ige at UFC Fight Night Fizzy versus Gamrot in September. That allowed him to bounce back from his lone official professional loss, which was almost exactly a year ago at UFC 282, where he was frankly overwhelmed on the feet and on the ground by Ilia Topuria. He will look to make it 2 in a row and reestablish himself as a rising contender in the division. He is favored to do so. Mitchell is minus 200, Emmett plus 170 on the comeback. Man, I don't know who Josh Emmett pissed off, but this man cannot catch a break.
Yeah.
The UFC's matchmakers clearly have been listening to you. In our when we match make fighters on the recaps, since you're the one who tends to, hey, if fighter X wants to keep fighting while he's in the decline, well, let's use him to build the up and comers. Yair Rodriguez, former title challenger, Ilia Topuria, almost certain future title challenger, probably this coming year.
Yeah.
Bryce Mitchell, right there in the picture if he gets the win. Just Emmett cannot seem to catch a break. And this is an interesting matchup. I mean, Emmett, you like him. I like him. He's the perfect guy to be kind of the last of the old school Team Alpha male wrestle boxers. He's another one of those just stocky built, came to MMA as a very good wrestler, just, from the same mold as Faber, Benavidez, Mendez, all those guys. His offensive wrestling at this point is a ghost of a rumor, of a myth, of a memory.
Right.
I mean,
that's right.
The guy used to have a good power double. I can't remember the last time he shot a takedown from outside, which leaves him as a short guy for the division, who prefers punching to kicking, has good power, but doesn't necessarily have the wherewithal to bring that power to connect on other people's chins, and still fighting elite fighters, and just doesn't have the durability to hang with them anymore. He's become one-dimensional in his old age, and with his history of injuries, kind of the anti-Clay Guida in that way, maybe. And here against Mitchell, this is a rough matchup for him, man. Mitchell, I thought he was a pretty good prospect when he came to the UFC. I forget all the kind of silly, outrageous stuff he says and does outside the cage. In the cage, surprisingly smart fighter, undeniably tough. I mean, once you've shredded your own nutsack with a drill in the comfort of your own home, nothing in the octagon is going to hold any terrors for you. I will say this for Mitchell. His striking is still a work in progress, but he is one of the best takedown artists in the UFC for a guy that doesn't approach it like a regular wrestler. Like, you don't see him shoot you don't see him shoot a conventional, low single or submarine double like Emmett used to, but he's gotten good wrestlers down to the canvas. Yeah. No problem. I mean, look at his last fight. Bouncing back from a bad loss to Ilia Topuria, he fights Dan Ige, and he takes Ige down with ease in all 3 rounds, and it's not a kind of dipsy doodle, 5th try, finally kind of hauls you down like Damian Maia. We're talking about he gets inside on Ige, slams him down and lands in side control, or slams him down and as Ige rolls, just immediately takes his back. He's becoming, he's not one-dimensional, but he's becoming the kind of specialist that can thrive in modern MMA because he is good at forcing other fighters into his kind of fight. When they were on the feet, Ige is a niftier boxer. Ige split him wide open in the second round. It's, the only thing that kept Mitchell from winning all 3 rounds easily is that Ige caught him with one punch that busted his face wide open and kind of changed the complexion of that round. Here, I don't know if Emmett will even get that. Emmett used to be a rock-solid defensive wrestler, but here he's going to be smaller than Mitchell. He's going to be slower than Mitchell, and I could see Mitchell just getting him, with trip, body lock, or hoist and slam type takedowns. I think if Mitchell decides to test his luck on the feet against Emmett, that's the path of most danger for him, but I think he'll probably do all right there as well. Either Emmett's power is not what it used to be, or his ability to place that power on other people's chins isn't what it used to be. It's probably a little of both, but I think Mitchell just overwhelms Emmett here. I think it's going to be kind of ugly, and that's a bummer for me, just because, it's hard not to like Josh Emmett. He's been a enjoyable fighter with an enjoyable style for a long time in the UFC, probably never reached the heights he could have because of all the injuries, and it's felt like the game has passed him by to the point where elite fighters are putting him away without much trouble, and I think Mitchell is going to prove himself an elite fighter here by doing exactly that. Give me Mitchell by second round submission, but after a first round where Emmett probably only makes it through just from pure guts and heart, and it's maybe the thing where he's on the ground, beat up, fighting off like a rear naked choke for like 2 minutes of the round or something. But Mitchell second round submission.
Yeah. I want to say something before someone puts in the comments, because just in case it might be interpreted wrong. Topuria is fighting Volkanovski next, so that's right about now. I know you. I meant to he's not a title challenger yet, but I know someone will be like, hey, he's booked. So
thank you.
I don't want people to interpret it wrong. This is what I love about this fight. This card. I'm looking at this card, and you have Josh Emmett. He's fighting Giga Chikadze. That's a good, fun, top ranked guys going against each other. Two guys who recently has, fought each other. And then that fight for – oh, sorry, I'm getting mixed up here. Sorry. Someone's texting me while I'm trying to – no. Two guys who fought in main events, that fight falls apart because Chikadze drops out, and they get Bryce Mitchell to come in on like a week's notice, like a 2 weeks notice. Like that's crazy how deep this card is. Mitchell is a southpaw he's a very underrated striker. He lands more than people think because his opponents is concerned with his grappling. So he's constantly moving forward. He's on the gas. He beats guys with pressure. I like his kicking game. He throws kicks to close the distance. He likes to follow those kicks into the pocket, and he has good entries, but which is more kind of getting the guys on the back foot. But like you said, he's not going to blast through your hips. He's going to glove it to share a snatch, single you. Mm-hmm. Kind of as he's closing distance. He isn't a wrestler. He's more of a creative scramble and win kind of thing. Constantly keeping his hits moving and following the hips. And when he gets the fight to the ground, he's a bit of a wizard on the ground. I mean, he's very strong control. If he gets an open, he takes the back really quickly. He obviously he's got some really good flexibility. He can get subs in every position, on top, on bottom. I mean, guy has a twister and almost had a second one. Now, I don't expect that to happen to Josh Emmett, but he can be taken down. That's because he doesn't care about being on his back. He likes to switch when getting taken down on a scrum, which I'm not crazy about. But my one concern is that he was submitted by Ilia Topuria, so he's not he's not Damian Maia on the ground, but he's more of an opportunistic, scrappler. But Topuria is seems like a generational talent. This kid's incredibly talented. Mm-hmm. Emmett's 38 years old, coming off 2 epic beatdowns. It makes you wonder if the dude's shot. I mean, especially considering even his wins, he's taken so much damage. I mean, Calvin Kattar, that was a war. Shane Burgos, he ate shots in that fight. I used to always call him a wrestle boxer, but I'm with you, man. I'm just going to call him a short, stocky boxer who isn't very technical, I think his hand speed is slowing. I think his footwork is bad. I mean, he really struggled to close a distance and to get in the pocket and lunge shots against Topuria, and even worse against Yair Rodriguez. He tends to load up on everything. When he shortens his stuff and tightens it up, he can be dangerous. I mean, I like his right hand. He's got power in both hands. Now, his power is grossly overrated. I mean, the dude doesn't have a knockout in 4 years. So, take that with a grain of salt. I mean, he throws hard. but he's not as dangerous as they make him sound like. Now, he also makes a mistake of chasing the knockout instead of letting it come to him. He's like trying to end the fight with a single shot, which is obviously easy for top guys to avoid. He is best when he sets up his power shots when going to the body first. Another thing, he can forget to reload his shots and leaves them open. Like he'll throw a big shot and kind of drop his hands down by his side. His lead leg is a target due to being heavy on it and being such a target. We've seen him get injured by getting his legs kicked out and stuff. He has a wrestling background, but you mentioned he never wrestles. I don't think he can at this age anymore. I mean, he's got 2 takedowns in the last 6 years. So, and Topuria and Ige both took him down. Again, Topuria is an elite talent, but Ige on paper shouldn't be able to take him down. Now, Ige is a good fighter, so I'm not trying to diss him, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think of the top guys in the division, this is the best stylistic match for Emmett. Like, this is the best he can have. He's still the better athlete of these two, I think. I think he's the better overall boxer, even though I do think Mitchell's overall striking game is underrated. But like actual boxing, like if they had a boxing match, I would favor Emmett. He hits harder. He's the better wrestler on paper, based on, their backgrounds. I just think he's a shot fighter. And not in the sense that I question his chin and that he can't beat he can't beat guys in the UFC. I just don't think he can hang with the top guys in the division anymore. And that's the situation he's still facing. I think Mitchell puts a pace on Emmett. I think it forces him on his back foot, just throwing haymakers, trying to time him, trying to snuff him coming in. And I think he'll maybe stop initial 1 or 2 takedown attempts, but eventually I think he doesn't stop them. I think the volume of the takedowns, I think there's going to be a lot of time of back control where Mitchell will be backpacking them and stuff. And I don't think he gets a sub. I think Emmett's tough and crafty, but I say Mitchell wins a pretty one-sided decision.
The 5-fight main card of UFC 296 begins with a welterweight clash between Vicente Luque and Ian Garry. Luque, the 32-year-old Brazilian, is 22-9-1 overall. He is 15-5 since joining the UFC out of the 21st season of The Ultimate Fighter. He is coming in off a win. He defeated Rafael dos Anjos by unanimous decision in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 51 in August. Prior to that, he had back-to-back losses to Bilal Muhammad and Jeff Neal, followed by a full year's layoff. So he's back to some extent. He's trying to prove that he's more than just an action fighter and bonus magnet, and could probably think of no better way to do so than to hand Garry his first professional loss. Garry, 26-year-old Irishman, is a perfect 13-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is a perfect 6-0 since joining the UFC as the former Cage Warriors welterweight champ. He has fought 3 times this year, going 3-0, obviously. He knocked out Song Kanan back in March, turned around, came back 9 days later, and knocked out Daniel Rodriguez in the first round, then fought in August and took a unanimous decision over Neil Magny, his first kind of top 15-ish quality win. He'll look to continue that rise up the ranks against Luque, who's been a fringe contender for a couple of years now, and he is comfortably favored to do so. Garry is minus 375, second biggest favorite on the card. Luque plus 250 as your underdog. Man, there's a lot going on here. Part of it is Vicente Luque. I talked about this card being kind of a showcase for feeding the old lions to the young lions. Luque isn't that much older than Garry in calendar years, but he's an old 32. I mean, he's a guy that I think he was like 11-5 when he got to the UFC because he started fighting super early, barely trained. So, I mean, he's got a lot of tread off the tires. He's been one of the most reliable action fighters in the welterweight division for going on a decade now. It's 2 things have happened. One, that seems to be catching up with him. And 2, while, I mean, I love Luque as a fighter. How can you not like this guy? But he never developed past his basic weaknesses. Like, he's good everywhere, but someone who's very good in one facet of fighting tends to be able to force Luque to fight against his best advantage and win. Like, more technical strikers, especially ones with a reach advantage on them, have kind of toyed with him. Stephen Thompson, Jeff Neal. Like, Luque is a pretty good wrestler, but a very good wrestler like Bilal Muhammad was able to just take him down and use the threat of the takedown to completely mute Luque's offense. So yeah, fighters who are really good in one area have always been Luque's Achilles heel, especially if they kind of are disciplined enough and purposeful enough as fighters that they can force the fight onto their terms. So yeah, Luque has plateaued and maybe starting to show some of the signs of wear already, even as he remains, kind of at least kind of 15 through 20 guy in the division. If Garry really is the future, I think this is a showcase fight for him against Luque. Gary's got all the physical tools. He's a huge welterweight, good athlete. A sound striker who I think generates his power just through like decent technique and his raw physical tools rather than overswinging on everything. He's with a good camp. He's been with Killcliff for a couple of fights now. This should be the kind of fight where if Luque is smart, he'll try to bring Garry to the ground, where Garry is good on the ground but just less proven, and Luque's got a very good ground game. But I think Garry will be able to avoid that. That's always been Luque's problem. I think Garry is going to be able to keep this thing on the feet, hurt Luque, maybe hurt him badly, probably finish him within the first 2 rounds. The big wild card here is that Garry is under like bombardment from like 5 different angles right now with just like a cornucopia of outside the cage distractions. Yeah. And I'm not even going to run him down. If you want to know the relevant ones, look at the news on the Show Dog front page. If you want to know some of the likely irrelevant ones, just look up his name on the social media platform of your choice and you'll see plenty. None of it matters unless it matters to Garry. And the one thing about Garry is that he's always seemed extremely composed and mature for how young he is. I mean, if that's the real Ian Garry and not just, for show, he shakes all this off and takes the showcase in what should be a showcase fight. If any of that stuff actually is distracting him right now, and it's grimy personal stuff, folks, if any of that is getting to Garry, Luque is not the guy you want to be distracted against. Because, he is a guy with very good knockout power and an extremely opportunistic submission game. Like, he's a good grappler. He's an extremely dangerous submission artist. If he's not number 1, he's number 2 in all time in the UFC in Bravo chokes right now. And it's just from having a quick opportunistic front headlock game that he has snapped on people, and surprised him with. So Luque's best chance here lies with Garry being distracted and either just underprepared or not focused in the case, but I'm not picking that to be the case. I think Garry mutes all the noise, punishes Luque on the feet, probably turns away some takedowns, knocks him out in the second round.
I'll address one thing that he said he doesn't feel safe about his family coming to America. Like, that's a shame. Like, yeah, like whatever happened with his wife and his stupid book and magazine or whatever they claim, like whatever, like that's between them, and they claim it wasn't serious or whatever. But like, he shouldn't feel threatened. So if anybody's threatening them, you're an asshole. And I'm not saying they are. I'm not picking sides, but there might be a little attention grabbing there too. But like, don't be assholes. Like, that's a mom and a little baby. So not that I don't think fans are doing that, but anyways, it's a fucking great fight. Like, this is perfect matchmaking. Mm-hmm. This is exactly the test for a young guy, but man, like it's a hell of a test because Luque's a crafty veteran, and Machado Garry, man, he asked for a big fight. Here you go, man. He's really big for the weight class. He's long and lengthy. He moves really well, very elusive. I love his footwork. He's a very good striker. He's a builder who gets stronger as the fight goes on, which I love. Very relaxed, technical, a bit of an outsider where he works from range. Fast hands, accurate. He tends to measure his foe, which I saw in his last fight against Magny. Nice jab. He attacks with combinations. Slips and rip really well. I love that he goes to the body for like a young age to be tackling the body. Good head movement. He needs to have good head movement because he hangs his hands a little low for my liking. But we've seen some power out of him recently, and he's only 26, so he's just starting to reach that time where he's starching guys. Now, I like his step in knees to keep his opponents honest from crashing the pocket. He's got a good kicking game, good inside leg kicks, good calf kicks, great high kick. I mean, we saw him land a beautiful high kick against Daniel Rodriguez. He can wrestle a bit. He has a judo background, so he likes to kind of get inside and upper body takedowns. Good top game, mean ground and pound. He does attack submissions. Like he's a little bit of a specialist where he likes to head attacks. He likes to anaconda chokes and Darce chokes and stuff like that. But a big thing about his game is I love the confidence that he has. He has, he gets compared to Conor McGregor he talks and he trash talks and everything. And he gets compared to Conor because obviously he's Irish and confident and all that. But so many other guys have been compared to Conor, and it seems like it was like a little staged, like the way they try to do it. He doesn't seem like that. He seems like he has just self-belief in him. He has a little bit like that, like Khabib or Islam, when they say things like they put things in existence and it's just going to happen because they have that self-confidence. And I like that about him. Luque, man, he's a scary dude. You better have some self-confidence. You got to fight for Vicente Luque. High output striker, pressure striker, absolutely fearless, constantly moving forward, taking ground. Bit of a plotter, which has always kind of kept him from being elite because he's not a great athlete. But he's a boxer with a high guard defense, works behind a jab, keeps his power shots in tight and crisp, throws combinations, comes straight down the pipe with hard shots. When he gets in the pocket, he unloads violent shots. The issues is he lacks head movement. He defensive rolls, shoulder rolls and deflects things, which I'm not a fan of. He's also walks willing to eat a shot to land some of his own. No, he's always been one of the most durable fighters in UFC history with insane toughness. I mean, I think about that beating he took against Stephen Thompson and just kept moving forward. Same thing with Jeff Neal. But I do think he's seen signs of decline. So I am worried about his chin because he's taking so much damage. He's intelligent, and I'll get to that in a second. I'll put a little pin on that. But he's got good leg kicks. But he's intelligent where we see a lot more of his grappling lately because I think he knows the signs are there, that he might not be able to take the damage that he always can. I was shocked at how well he was able to out-wrestle Rafael dos Anjos. Mm-hmm. Now, that's also an aging guy, and I don't think either guy looked great. It wasn't like a tremendous victory, but that's an avenue where before you would have favored RDA in the grappling. Now, he's a weak defensive wrestler, though I do think he's shown some signs of proving that. But I mean, the one fight recently he was really out wrestled was against Bilal Muhammad, but Bilal Muhammad does that to everybody right now. So I kind of give him a pass on that. And he's a submission threat. He's got 6 subs. He's a Darce choke expert. He hits it on everybody, and he's hard to sub. And he has the cardio. He has the experience. He has the mindset to be able to go hard the entire 15 minutes. Like no matter what's happening in the fight against Garry, and Gary's put on a performance and he's piecing them up and dropping them. Vicente Luque is not going to he's not going to panic. He's not going to make a mistake. He might be out-tooled, but I mean he's not going to be like, oh no, I'm in trouble. Let me rush to something. That's something that he won't do. I'm a fan. I mean, you mentioned how can you not be a fan of Vicente Luque? You don't like MMA if you don't like Vicente Luque. Yeah. And this is a massive test to Garry. I just feel like Gary's going to be a top 5 guy. He has that moxie in him. And I think he's going to be on the top of the division for a while. He has all the tools. I think he batters Luque. I think Luque will look to get the fight to the ground. I think he'll be able to get the fight to the ground 1 or 2 times. I just think Garry's going to adjust. He's going to get it back to his feet. He's going to pick his shots. I think he might start changing, going to the body, start going to step in knees, make it like, hey, if you're going to come down here, you're going to eat some of these things. Luque is super durable, super tough. So I think he reached his decision, but I think we got a lopsided decision for Garry.
All right. That's 2 picks for Ian Garry to, again, kind of mute the noise and make the most of his biggest fight to date.
Speaking of real quick, before we move on to the next fight, how crazy is the press conference going to be this week? Think about this. I don't know who they're going to have on like the press conference, but Colby Covington saying his shit, Tony Ferguson saying his shit,
and Paddy Pimblett at each
Paddy
other.
Pimblett saying his shit, Ian Garry saying his shit, and then like Stephen Thompson praying for everybody.
Yeah, and I mean, he's on the prelims, but you could just see them throwing Bryce Mitchell in there.
Bryce Mitchell. Well, yeah, what am I talking about? We're talking about the craziest guy in the card, and we might not even be talking about Tony Ferguson.
Yeah, like it's.
Yeah, and then you also got Garbrandt.
Yeah.
Oh man, covering it would be fun this week.
Yes.
I mean, if I don't know, who's going for, some of the websites out there. If you don't get a good, if you listen, if all those guys at media day, if they don't get some sound bites on media day, they're all fired. Fire every single one of them. Ban them all from the UFC, because if you can't get sound bites from these guys.
Next up on the UFC 296 main card is a lightweight matchup between Tony Ferguson and Paddy Pimblett. Ferguson, the 39-year-old California native, is 25-9 overall. He is 15-7 since joining the UFC as the winner of the 13th season of The Ultimate Fighter. He, once upon a time, won 12 straight fights in arguably the hardest division in the sport to do so. Made his way all the way to an interim title, and only through his own propensity for injury and that of Khabib Nurmagomedov, we never got the fight that everybody wanted for several years there. However, that's all well in the past, and he is currently sitting on a 6-fight losing streak and will be doing his best not to tie BJ Penn for the longest losing streak in UFC history against Pimblett this weekend. Ferguson fought most recently at UFC 291 back in July, where he got choked all the way to sleep by Bobby Green. Prior to that, the losses: Nate Diaz, Michael Chandler, Beneil Dariush, Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje. He'll look to turn this all around against Pimblett. Pimblett, 28-year-old Liverpool native, 20-3 overall. A perfect 4-0 since joining the UFC as a former Cage Warriors featherweight champ, former Cage Warriors lightweight title challenger, or fought for the vacant title. He fought most recently, almost exactly a year ago, last December at UFC 282, taking a contentious unanimous decision over Jared Gordon. Plenty of people out there thought Gordon should have won the fight. Gordon, of course, very vocal among them, but, quite a few people. Here, he's going to have a chance to shine on the big stage under the bright lights in the UFC's final pay-per-view of the year. Pimblett is a prohibitive favorite. He's minus 350. Ferguson is plus 275 as your underdog. Paddy Pimblett at this point is a better fighter than Tony Ferguson. They are miles apart in terms of their physical condition, their wear and tear. However, Pimblett right now, yeah, he's on a long win streak. He's won 6 in a row. He's won 4 straight in the UFC, but his fights in the UFC have been close nip and tuck affairs in some cases against low-level fighters. His UFC debut was against Luigi Vendramini, and he got a KO at the end of a wild round 1 where he got rung up multiple times by a guy who was decidedly not UFC material. He had a back and forth war with Jared Gordon that not a majority, but better, like a third of observers thought Gordon should have won. this is nothing against Jared Gordon. Jared Gordon is great, but future UFC champs don't have a back and forth war with Jared Gordon. And they definitely, like, somebody who gets in a toe-to-toe war with Luigi Vendramini and almost loses does not want any part of Dustin Poirier or Justin Gaethje, and may not even want any part of Tony Ferguson. Here's the thing. Ferguson is shot. What he has right now is about 3 minutes of the kind of offense he used to offer.
Man, can I correct you?
Yes.
Jerry Gordon beat Charles Oliveira. Oh, no, he lost to Charles Oliveira. I'm sorry. I read that wrong. I was going to say, all right, shut up.
Well,
shut up. Cut that out.
All right.
No, just keep going. I'm an idiot.
But, Ferguson, he's physically a shot fighter. It's not like he's losing to bad fighters. He's losing, for the most part, to top 3 title picture fighters, and then, the Nate Diaz one was a tough look, and the way he lost to Bobby Green was not encouraging. But for the most part, he's been fighting very good fighters, and he's had glimmers of hope. He won the first round against Michael Chandler.
That's right.
And then got absolutely sniped, starched, knockout of the year contender like 10 seconds into the next round.
He had Bobby Green hurt. He had Bobby Green hurt.
Like, the skills are still mostly there. Like, physically, he's slowed, but he's not slowed as much as you would expect of a guy who's going to turn 40 in a couple months and has as many fights as he does. The problem is that the durability is completely gone. The problem is that Pimblett right now, he's barely squeaking by fighters who were never as good as Tony Ferguson is right now. Like, I take Tony Ferguson over Luigi Vendramini right now. Easy. And Pimblett's problem is he's a good grappler, like not a lights out grappler. He's not Bryce Mitchell, but he's a good grappler who, pardon my French, fucks around on the feet too much. And there's every chance that this is the fight where he fucks around and finds out. Ferguson has never had incredible one-shot power. He's always gotten his stoppages just by being a human wood chipper, just coming forward, slashing people up with knees, elbows, just death by 1,000 cuts, almost literally. And then also having a deadly quick strike submission game. Tony Ferguson's wrestling is only overrated if you think the goal of his wrestling is to take the other guy down. The goal of his wrestling is to start scrambles where he can grab their neck. That's the Tony Ferguson game. Like, yeah, he's a former college wrestler, but yeah, he's looking for ankle picks and snap downs and just things to put the other guy off balance so they're all tumbling around and all of a sudden Ferguson has a Bravo choke. I'm not picking Ferguson to win this. I can't, because if Pimblett gets in a wild brawl with Ferguson, if he catches him right, Ferguson's going to go down. Again, the durability's just gone. If it goes to the ground, and I mean, it probably will go to the ground if Ferguson gets out of the first couple minutes, Pimblett will need to tame his wild instincts. He'll need to be more of a sensible, established position, throw some punches, then try to advance type grappler. Because, I mean, if he goes out, just swinging wildly and then gets into a wild scramble with Tony Ferguson, he's handing Ferguson the only two plausible avenues of victory he has in this fight. And Pimblett is exactly the kind of guy who will hand him that on the silver platter. And yeah, so if I knew Pimblett was going to fight smart, hell, man, you could make him a -600 favorite. But Pimblett's going to give Ferguson every chance to win here. I don't think it's going to be enough. I'm going to say Pimblett wins this by second round TKO on the ground, but I could see him being in some danger in the first round. Ferguson is still a big, rangy lightweight. One of the guys where everything he hits you with kind of hurts, and Pimblett's going to give him plenty of chances to hurt him. Maybe it's another fight where Ferguson actually wins the first round. It looks like he's back by whatever definition of back you want to put on 39-year-old Tony Ferguson, but eventually Pimblett's going to catch him with a punch, put him down, finish it on the ground. I'm going to say it's a TKO on the ground, but if Pimblett decides to get saucy, drop Ferguson and like take his back and choke him out, he'll have to choke him because Ferguson's not going to tap to anything. We've seen him. I mean, we've seen Ferguson in this losing streak go to sleep rather than tap and sit there and watch Beneil Dariush and Charles Oliveira put his limbs on backwards and not tap. So, yeah, I'm going to say Pimblett wins by TKO on the ground.
Man, you're so close to taking Tony Ferguson.
Dude, I've been struggling with it all week.
Yeah, I haven't.
Nah.
I'll say this. I saw so many people bitching about Paddy Pimblett getting the Tony Ferguson fight. Like, guys, you don't know how to matchmake. This is the perfect matchup. Like, what are you talking about? You have the personalities. You have the name to get Pimblett over. Don't like Paddy. What? You know, whatever. The guy's a star.
And he points out that it's a little bit of a no-win situation for him.
Exactly. That's
a good
point.
Ferguson was washed up. If he loses, Pimblett was never any good.
Exactly.
Like all he can do is win in spectacular fashion and then say something outrageous.
But that's too hardcores. To the casuals, they're like, oh, you beat Tony Ferguson. Wow, this Paddy Pimblett guy is really good, you know? So that's who you always cater to. Like, I don't know why people can't understand that. You always cater to the casuals. Why? Because I'm always going to watch. Ben's always going to watch. Dev's always going to watch. All the people in the chat's going to watch. Like, we're always going to watch. So I'm not going to rehash what you said about Ferguson having moments because he did. He really did have moments. He throws from weird angles and he still has good output. He works behind a jab. He's got a good follow-up right. Of course, he's going to do some spinning shit. The problem with Tony Ferguson, and it's got to the point you mentioned his durability, failing him, is he was always one of the easiest guys to hit, even in his prime. Mm-hmm. Think about his run. He always had moments where he got hurt and dropped and was losing.
Dude, Lando Venata is still in the UFC 7.5 years later based off hurting Tony Ferguson for about 2 minutes.
Mostly. Yeah. He constantly moving forward with his hands down, flowing, but throwing a teep kick with his hands straight down. The issue is those have taken a toll on him, and his chin has failed him. He doesn't have that durability anymore. He doesn't check leg kicks. I mean, Justin Gaethje and Charles Oliveira had field days crushing his legs. He's always been a grossly overrated grappler. I mean, he's this funk style wrestler, but he looks like a JV wrestler that he looks like a kid who like shows up to my son's team next practice who's not good and but he happened to catch like a video of like a good scramble, like a highlight on Flow Wrestling and saw like a scramble in a college match and goes, oh, fuck it. I'll try that then. I can do that, and then just starts rolling all over the place, he likes to look for subs in transition. I mean, the front headlock series is his best thing, like catching a submission in a scramble. He has those slicing elbows on the ground, which always been. But despite having a wrestling, NCAA wrestling background, his takedowns always been pretty bad. Mm-hmm. They talk about him wrestling in college. I'm pretty sure he wasn't on scholarship. Like he was just like some like wrestling kid. He was like, oh, I watched the movie Vision Quest. I'll give it a shot. Like that'd be fun to do. Like when I played. What's that game with you play football but with a frisbee? Ultimate Frisbee. I played Ultimate Frisbee in college for a little bit because
but you know what? Tony Ferguson watched Vision Quest. His favorite part of the whole movie was Garry shoot running up the steps with like the telephone pole across the shoulders. He's like, I want to do that. The wrestling's fine, but I really want to run up stadium steps carrying a telephone pole.
The thing is, he kicked it down first. Yeah. I feel like he's seen like AC Slater and Saved by the Bell and was like, oh, I've seen Saved by the Bell. I can wrestle, So speaking of which, did you grow like I had two older sisters, so I will admit I watched a lot of I've seen every single episode. I love it. I don't care. Did you watch Saved by the Bell at all? Or are you too old?
I'm the oldest of four, so I never watched Saved by the Bell.
Okay, well, let me tell you about bad writing. Now, The entire show is bad writing, but whatever. It's 1980s, early 90s sitcom.
Yeah.
AC, obviously AC Slater is.
Yeah, Mario Lopez.
Yeah. So there's a scene where Mario Lopez's dad is like a big, I don't know, he's a general or something like that, colonel or something, and he wants him to go to West Point, but he won a big wrestling. I think he won like the state tournament, and of course in the stands is a scout from Iowa. Now this is the Dan Gable. I mean, Iowa already is like one of the best ever, anyways. But this is late 80s, early 90s. This is the Dan Gable, Iowa. Mm-hmm. Comes in and gives him a scholarship, but he can't tell his dad. Okay. Fast forward to, the show ends and they do the college years, and he doesn't go to Iowa on the wrestling scholarship. He goes to California University with Zach Morris and Screech and them. And then he can't make the wrestling. Oh, he's on the wrestling team, but he can't beat the varsity wrestler for California University. Wait a minute. The guy was getting a scholarship to Iowa, and now he can't make the varsity team for California University?
All right. Confirmed AC Slater is actually Gan McGee.
There you go.
Who like briefly wrestled for Iowa and then ended up at like Cal Poly SLO.
Yeah. it was there you go. They just Saved by the Bell. Everyone post in the comments your favorite Saved by the Bell episode.
That's amazing.
And right away, like 90% of our listeners are like, these guys are freaking old. Where were they talking? You know what? In fairness, I can go down this road because we're talking about Tony Ferguson, so your mind works that way. What do I do with my notes? My notes disappeared somewhere. But I mean, I see Tony Ferguson enough. Like he was never a good wrestler. He catching his scramble, but like even like when he went against Kevin Lee, like he came back and beat him, but like Kevin Lee took him down, mounted him, was beating him up. Charles Oliveira and Benil Dariush made it seem like he never grappled in his life. And yeah, those are guys are as leading up, but he also got subbed by Nate Diaz, the ghost of Nate Diaz, and Bobby Green in his last fight. And then there's always that concern. I mean, I'm having those same concerns about Bryce Mitchell, and I'm not talking about like being a Christian and holding the Bible. I mean, that's a little weird, but I'm a Christian, so I'm not like talking about being religious, but he's got some screws loose.
Well, the main problem is that it was so obviously like the Gideon's Bible from his hotel room. It's not like he even thought of it at home. He just like saw the Bible in his sock drawer that morning at the hotel. Was like,
well, there's other parts of it. I was waiting for him to like freaking cast a spell out of his opponent. and then poor Danny Gay. He's a good Christian guy too. He's very Christian, but he just lost. And he's like, dude, I don't want to like crouch down and pray with you. But he's also Christian, so he doesn't want to not do that. Yeah. But Tony Ferguson, like he's got mental issues, and it's like, dude's not right. And it's at the point where it's funny, but it's sad too. So, what with Paddy Pimblett? I mean, I'll say this. I think I'm a little higher on Paddy Pimblett than you are, which is kind of weird because I feel like we were the opposite when he first came in the UFC. Where I
think so. I think I've been just so unimpressed by his performance in the UFC. Like, I'm kind of starting to fade him a little bit,
and rightfully so. Like he's going to get a bad matchup, and he's going to get beat up. He's never going to win the UFC title. It's not going to happen. But he doesn't need to. And the UFC shouldn't even book him that way. I don't think he should. I think he should be booked against Tony Ferguson. Absolutely. I just think he should be booked in Tony Ferguson in freaking England. Like, I think every one of his fights should be in England. But I think he's more skilled than the haters give him credit to. And I know you're not a hater. Like, I know you're not. Like, I'm not calling you that. We don't hate on fighters. Like, that's not what we do. Like,
no. Like, let me just interject. My problem isn't with his skills, but his fight IQ. Like, he's a fighter who has some high level skills, but almost fights against them. Like, why would you get in wild brawls when your best route to win is grappling?
Yeah. But I mean, I think it was people will trash him, and like even if you thought he lost the Jared Gordon fight, like Jared Gordon's a tough out. Mm-hmm. To even be in a competitive fight that could have went either way is not a. I mean, it's not a good showing. It's not like, oh wow, you struggle with Jared Gordon, but a lot of guys struggle with Jared Gordon. So so he's the 40th best lightweight in the world. That's still pretty freaking good.
Yeah.
I think he's a better athlete than he looks. I mean, you give him the Beatles haircut, and right away you don't think friggin'. When you think of John Lennon,
haircut, and you see how like just ridiculously fat he gets between camps.
Yeah, he gets fat,
and it leads you to underestimate him as an athlete.
Yeah, but you look at the Beatles haircut, you don't think of Paul McCartney and John Lennon and think like triathlon. You don't think Carl Lewis and Usain Bolt.
Yeah.
But he flows well. Like he flows. He's got pretty good footwork. I think he's a better striker than he gets credit. I think you have a good point. Like he should grapple more, but I mean, he hits hard. I mean, he had a back and forth moment with Luigi Fioravanti, but he still blasted him into next week.
Mm-hmm.
He has a lot of defensive balls. That's my concern with him. Very hittable. He drops his hands. He backs straight up. He keeps his chin high in the air. He doesn't like being pressured. He wants to be the one moving forward. I like his kicking game. He uses kicks really well to keep distance. He's got a good question mark kick. He loves to throw flying knees. I'd say he's a decent wrestler, but definitely more of a grappler. His goal is to create a scramble and get it going. He's not, like powerful, explosive penetration step wrestler. He's more of uses size, clinch, which is funny that he's a big lightweight because he used to be a featherweight.
Yeah. But
clinch, use upper body trips. He had a beautiful judo throw on Kazula Vargas. Again, it's Kazula Vargas, so I understand that. He's a weak defensive wrestler, especially when he'll like pull guard or tries to jump a guillotine. But he's very flexible, good submissions, right? Takes backs really well. He subbed Jordan Levitt, which looked good at the time. It hasn't aged that well, but at that time was pretty good. And he's always been, even in his run in England, like always good at going sub to sub to sub to sub, like chaining them together. I think Paddy smashes him. I say he closes distance. I actually say he takes Tony Ferguson down. I think he takes his back, holds him on the back. I say he does it over and over and over again, and I think he locks up a submission. Give me Paddy Pimblett by third round submission.
Third from the top at UFC 296 is a welterweight matchup between Shavkat Rakhmonov and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Rakhmonov, the 29-year-old Kazakhstani, is a perfect 17-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. He's a perfect 5-0 in the UFC. All 5 wins by stoppage, 4 by submission, 1 by knockout, as he's sort of made his way up the ranks in logical fashion. He fought most recently in March at UFC 285, choking out Jeff Neal in the 3rd round. He's coming back for his second fight of 2023 and getting the kind of marquee high name value opponent that he's been asking for in the form of Thompson. Thompson, 40-year-old South Carolina native, is 17-6-1 overall. He is 12-6-1 in the UFC. He is a 2-time welterweight title challenger. He fought back-to-back fights with Tyron Woodley. The first, a draw in a great fight. The second, a majority decision loss in a terrible fight. Since then, he's an even 4-4, but he's beaten some very good fighters while losing to others. He won his last time out. He fought almost exactly a year ago in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 42, where he pieced up Kevin Holland, kind of schooled him on the way to a corner stoppage between the 4th and 5th rounds. So Thompson, definitely in the final stages of his career, still capable of taking down a high-quality opponent. He'll look to get one more done, even now in his 40s. He is most decidedly not favored to do so, as Rakhmonov is the biggest favorite on the card. He is minus 600, Thompson plus 425. Great thing about Stephen Thompson is you would not have thought that his style would be one to age well. I mean, he's arguably, I mean, it's hard to avoid Machida since Machida actually won a title, but he's one of the most successful traditional karate stylists in MMA history. And if anything, to an even more exaggerated extent than Machida. Like, Thompson stands like he is in a full contact or even a point karate bout. It's so dependent on timing and rhythm and distance that you wouldn't have thought it was going to keep working as he pushed 40. Like, if you'd asked me, even when I thought he was so much fun to watch, back when he was starching Jake Ellenberger right after Ellenberger made fun of karate 7 or 8 years ago, I would have said, this guy's a ton of fun. He'll dip into the top 10 for a minute, but there's no way he's going to still be fighting at age 40, let alone sniping top 10 fighters in the UFC. Yet here he is. I mean, he had 2 razor close fights with Tyron Woodley back when the UFC was talking about Woodley as arguably the greatest welterweight of all time, or him making a case to become that. And even since then, even in the so-called decline, he's made otherwise elite strikers in the division like Jeff Neal and Kevin Holland look outclassed. The people that have beaten Thompson, again, even here in the so-called final act, the decline of his career, it's people who've been able to take him down. His takedown defense is not as impregnable as it once was. Bilal Muhammad got him down over and over again. And then what else is there? There's Gilbert Burns. There's Anthony Pettis, who caught him with one hell of a punch after being mostly schooled on the feet. And Darren Till, who got a gift decision in England after blowing weight by 6 pounds. That's it. It's Stephen Thompson is still, it's not even top 10. He's the gatekeeper to the top 5. If you beat Stephen Thompson, you're in the top 5 and deserve to be in the title picture at this point in 2023 going on 2024. The problem is that Rakhmonov is the perfect guy to take advantage of the slight erosion of Thompson's takedown defense. If Rakhmonov decides to spend any more time on the feet than he has to, that's a poor decision on his part. Again, look no further than Holland, Neal, Masvidal, Luque. Good strikers have looked clueless against Stephen Thompson, even now. But if Bilal Muhammad could get Thompson down, and he got him down with some of his first effort takedowns. He didn't even have to do the Bilal Muhammad, super grindy, reshoot 3 times, single to a double, run from the pipe. He just flat out, dragged Thompson down on his first try a couple times. Rakhmonov, who's one of the best athletes in the division and way bigger than Muhammad and probably bigger than Thompson, is going to be able to do it. And from there, Thompson's never been more than pretty basic on the ground. It's pretty much survive and try to get back up is Thompson's strategy once he's down there. I don't think he's going to be able to do either against Rakhmonov. This, at this point, is a showcase for the man from Kazakhstan. I expect he'll take down Thompson in the first round, touch him up with some ground and pound, probably choke him out, just take his back, slap on a rear naked choke. Give me Rakhmonov by first round submission here. We'll get to see the largest hat in the UFC make an appearance. He'll say some really happy stuff, holding up the cool looking teal flag of Kazakhstan, and move on to the title picture and maybe a title shot next year.
Yeah, the UFC didn't do Stephen Thompson any favors. I'm sure that this matchup has to do with his refusal to take a fight after his opponent missed weight and Michelle Pereira. I'm just gonna read the same notes I had for that fight. Nothing changed since then, other than Thompson getting older. He's one of the best strikers in MMA history. Shocking that he can still compete at this level at 40 years old. Still be I don't want to say a title challenger, but a ranked guy. And you beat Stephen Thompson, that's still a good win all these years later. But that could fade at any time. Considering he has always relied on incredible athleticism. I've said he looks like an acrobat out there. He's elusive, he's fluid, he flows so well from both stances. Slip and rip striker, elite head movement. He does hang his hands low. And that's because he's so great at laterally moving and cutting angles. He's good at causing his opponents to chase him and then suddenly stopping at a dime and landing a shot as timing where they're gonna step. He can also way back and suddenly he blitzes forward with a combo. He showed in his last fight that he's still very fast hands. He has that bladed karate stance, so it makes him a smaller target. I think his kicks is still very, very good. He's got a lot of variety in his striking, very creative. He pieced up Jorge Masvidal and Vicente Luque with a jab. He has that hook kick. He has that side kick. He mixes his kicks with his punches so well. He has had moments where he's been gun shy and be low output. I think about the Tyron Woodley, the second fight against Tyron Woodley, the fight against Darren Till. Those are examples of when he was right there, could win a fight, and he just didn't step on the gas. He's also open to leg kicks to that big base. He's never been a one-punch KO guy. And he kind of tends to lack a killer instinct. And I think that has to do with that karate, that point karate style that's not in their game to go in. And I know he has tons of kickboxing experience. So, yeah. But still, his first base was that point karate thing. And chin is an issue. I mean, Darren Till dropped him. Tyron Woodley clipped him. Anthony Pettis
starched him.
Yeah, Pettis starched him. And his takedown defense has always been bad, but it's gotten really bad. I mean, Bilal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns just turn him into a takedown. Again, Bilal Muhammad, I give kind of giving everyone a pass. And Gilbert Burns obviously is such a great fighter, but yeah, Rakhmonov, he's a huge guy. He's well-rounded. He's very calm and calculated on the feet, pressures his opponent's back, works behind a great jab, short, tight boxing side, crushes the body, has serious power. Now, he does back straight up, which is kind of the only floor I've seen him so far, and he stands a little tall. But what a chin. I mean, he was walking through punches from Jeff Neal, which is like, what? He uses his size really well in the clinch, some really good dirty boxing. He's a good wrestler, but I actually think his wrestling might be overrated, especially, his entries that aren't as good as they think, but his body locks are serious. He gets in there, uses his size, slams, and his top game is nothing short of amazing. I mean, Neil Magny had zero prayer for him on the ground. He's got 9 submission wins. He subbed Alex Oliveira, Michel Prejes, Neil Magny. I think Rakhmonov is the worst stylistic matchup for Thompson, probably in the entire division, or one of the worst, at least. I really don't see an average victory for Thompson. I mean, he's a great striker, but he isn't the power puncher that can catch Rakhmonov and starch him. I say he just gets pressured back. Rakhmonov closes the distance, takes him down, batters him on the ground. So many guys have taken Thompson down and haven't been able to finish him. I think Rakhmonov's going to be the guy to do that. I think he's going to take him down. I think he's going to ground and pound him or catch a submission. I'll say he does in the second round.
That brings us to the co-main event of UFC 296, a men's flyweight title fight between defending champ Alexandre Pantoja and challenger Brandon Royval. Pantoja, the 33-year-old Brazilian, is 26-5 overall. He is 10-3 in the UFC. He is, of course, your sitting champ, having won the title via split decision at UFC 290 back in July, where he took down Brandon Moreno, fresh out of his historic rivalry with Davison Figueiredo. The first defense of Pantoja's title reign will come not in a rematch with Moreno, but instead against the streaking Royval. Royval, 31-year-old Factory X product, is 15-6 overall. He's 5-2 in the UFC. He is on a 3-fight win streak since his first meeting with Pantoja, which we'll certainly talk about in a minute. But since his first meeting with Pantoja a little over 2 years ago, he has wins over Rogerio Bontorin, Matt Schnell, and Matheus Nicolau. The last 2 of those first-round finishes, the most recent of them, the Nicolau win, a KO like 2 minutes into their fight at UFC on ESPN, Holloway versus Allen back in April. Royval comes here into the biggest fight of his career. He is a slight to moderate underdog. Pantoja is minus 170, Royval plus 140 as your underdog. All right, Keith. We have a flyweight title fight. The UFC resisted the urge to make an immediate rematch between Moreno and Pantoja, so we have a fresh matchup for the second time in a row. Tell me there's no possible way this thing sucks. I mean, the first time they fought, it was a wild 2 rounds. Pantoja, tapped Royval out in the second round, but they both had their moments. How does it play out this time? And do you have reason to believe it'll be any different?
Yeah, I mean, usually I don't take too much stock in the first fight, but this one wasn't that long ago.
Right.
This
isn't Usman versus Edwards 1.
Exactly. And this is recently. But we've seen rematches that happened recently and the other guy wins. I mean, I think of Radico Torcha-Cordell 1 and 2. I think of
the Figueiredo Moreno going back and forth.
Oh yeah, perfect. I think of DC Stipe, and when you're at that high level, there's a reason why we have rivalries in combat sports. And you said, is there any reason to think this fight will suck? Brandon Royval's in it. Brandon Royval can't have a boring fight.
Nope,
it's impossible. Like Brandon Royval is I'm 100% convinced that Brandon Royval doesn't like step to the side of his bed, pull the sheets on there, and then like put himself in bed. Like he rolls himself into bed. Like he runs full speed. Like Brandon Royval is probably training by running as fast as he can and then sliding down a slip and slide somewhere.
Yeah.
Brandon Royval would be like I just picture Brandon Royval like, I want to go to like a water park with Brandon Royval. It just seemed like he'd be a fun dude at a water park.
Oh yeah, just like this little dude, just like jumping off the highest high dive and just cannonballing and seeing how big.
Yeah, he'd be like Napoleon in Bill and Ted's, where he's like running past the kids and shit, and like running to the like. I can just picture him.
Kids out of
yeah, just running as fast as he can to like go. I love Brandon Royval. What a fucking cool dude. And Pantoja, winning the belt and then having his speech to his dad was like, are you proud of me now? It's like one of the most teary-eyed moments in history. Like that was one of the for like, and I'm not, beating Brandon Moreno like is nothing against Brandon Moreno, but just it was a nice moment. I mean, Brandon, who doesn't like Brandon Moreno? This is a fun fight, man. How can you not? I have such respect for these guys. It's so much fun. Pantoja is a well-rounded fighter, and you know what? He might have been the best flyweight for a long time. Like he could have been on if it wasn't for Figueiredo and Moreno just happened to keep fighting each other. He could have been a champion for a couple of years now, because I've always thought he was very underrated. I mean, I picked him to beat Moreno. I think he's underrated. He's so good on the ground. He doesn't get enough credit for how good he's on the feet. He's a very underrated boxer. He gets in the pocket. He's got high output. He's got quick hands. He gets in there. He loads power shots. He loves to brawl, which is a little bit of an issue because he doesn't have the best head movement. But he's a guy, and I said this last time against Moreno, he just trusts his chin. He just trusts that I can throw and I can hit harder than you, and I can take it. And it usually works out for him. He's got really underrated power. I mean, he starched Wilson Heiss, which was a really good win. He starched Matt Schnell, which at that time was a really good win. Even last fight, he dropped Brandon Moreno in that fight. And he's a great wrestler. I mean, to take Moreno down 6 times in the fight where, by the midway through the second round, it was pretty obvious what he wanted to do. And Brandon Moreno had no answer for it. When it was probably 2-2, maybe going into the 5th round, maybe 3-1, but possibly 2-2, where if Brandon, I don't remember the scorecards, but I remember it was very close. And maybe it was 4-1. I'm sorry. But anyways, deep in the fight, he was still getting takedowns, still getting back takes. Some of the best back takes you'll see in the game is done by Pantoja. He's got 10 submissions on his record. I always go back to that Alex Perez, right, where he hit him with a nasty neck crank. He can get subs from all situations. And then just go down his record. Arm bars, guillotines, heel hooks. Obviously, rear naked chokes. Guys, and if you take him down, he will play BJJ off his back a little bit too much and give away moments in fights. But if he wants, he can explode. He's got some sweeps, and he showed even in a very high pace, very grueling, wrestle heavy match, he can go hard all 20 minutes. That's a big advantage he has because I don't know if Royval can because of his style. Now, Royval, he's a freaking athlete, massive for the weight class, long and lengthy, southpaw that just flows, and he's so creative. He's like a prime Tony Ferguson. Like he reminds me of that a little bit, his style, where he doesn't even know what he's doing because he's just making it up as he goes. Good output, long, straight, hard strikes right down the pipe. He has a little bit like that tall man's strength. Good jab. He loves crazy spinning shit. He's like a guy that would, speaking of like amusement park, he would like house like 8 hot dogs and then jump on one of these like freaking spinning things and like loving it and laughing about throwing up on everybody.
Yeah. Dude, his nickname is Raw Dog, and he's happy to explain it on the mic, and they have to constantly stop him.
Yeah. Stop. Yeah. Good kicking game. Obviously, he's got those long legs. Kicks to all areas of the body. He loves T kicks down the middle. He loves step-in knees. The issue with him, and this is, I don't want him to fix this because it'd be fun as hell just to see him do what he does. But if he wants to win the title, this would be the best thing, is pay attention to his defense a little bit. Don't drop your hands. Don't keep your chin on the air. Don't just walk forward, reckless abandon. I mean, Kai France cracked him for it. So he closes distance by following his strikes, which is good. He uses his size well in the clinch and tossing up knees really well. He will look to wrestle, but he's more of a guy that just wants to start a scramble and find out, figure out what's going to happen when we're all done, and I'm going to be in a better position. But he's a very weak defensive wrestler. That's because he jumped guillotine. Similar to what I said about Brian Kelleher, he does have a good guillotine, though. It's very dangerous. He uses his long limbs to toss out sub attempts. He's got really good flexibility. He kind of reminds me of like a Charles Oliveira in that sense, where he's not this traditional take you down, hold you down. He's more of just catch something in a scramble using those long legs. He constantly keeping his hips moving, very like Ben Askren funk wrestling, and he can get subs everywhere. I mean, this is a really fun fight because it's flyweights and two things, but as much as I break down this fight and I look at it, what was the betting line?
Pantoja minus 170, Royval plus 140.
I don't think that's enough. I think Pantoja should be a bigger favorite. And that's not a diss on Royval. I mean, I love Royval.
Yeah.
I want to get a season pass at Six Flags with him,
Oh yeah.
But just Pantoja's he's got the power advantage, and his defense, even though I just talked about him like willing to brawl, but if Royval does one of these crazy, Pantoja kicks the back of wizards, never mind guys who will willingly give up their back for offense. I think Pantoja's going to sub him again. I think he's going to make a mistake. I think Pantoja's going to take his back. I think he'll get a lot of back moments. I think he makes it further in the second. I say he gets subbed in the third. Give me Pantoja by third round sub.
Yeah, I love the breakdown of their comparative skills there, but it really does boil down to Royval's wildness to me, because you're right. Like everything Royval does, and I'm not saying there's no intelligence to it. You don't become this elite a fighter without, some amount of discipline and intelligence, but Royval's preparation is clearly built towards just building muscle memory and instincts for situations and then just letting it flow when he's out there. I imagine that he is an absolute joy and an occasional headache for Mark Montoya at the same time. Like I imagine, I've heard them talk between rounds for many rounds now since he's been at that gym for a good long time. But to a certain extent, I imagine that Montoya's preparation for Royval is just, let's work on your skills. Let's work on some situations you're going to find yourself in against Pantoja. Let's work through some situations from the first fight. But then on fight night, just sort of winding up that, the little wind up thing on his back and just pushing him out and letting him go. But the thing is, Royval, like his athleticism, his size, his elite offensive skills almost everywhere have turned him into a fighter that really just does trust his instincts. And against the very, very best of the best, that's betrayed him a bit. Like, he lost to Brandon Moreno because he got into a wild swinging match with a better pocket boxer, who's more disciplined, even if he's not quite as big and powerful. And then against Pantoja took him down easy in the first round of their fight. And the problem to me is that Royval wasted a lot of that round, like working for leg locks from the bottom.
Yeah.
It's super cool.
Not gonna happen.
I loved it. But if you don't get the leg lock, you're going to lose that round. And you're not going to get the leg lock against a top 5 fighter.
That's a good point.
That's the kind of thing that worked on the LFA level and even to a certain extent on the UFC level, but it's not going to work against the Pantojas or Davison Figueiredos if they'd ever fought of the world. And I don't know if Royval can break those kind of habits. It may just be hardwired into who he is. So, yeah, I don't know if this fight goes 1 round or 4, or if it even goes to the judges. I should be absolutely delightful while it goes, but at some point, there are going to be lapses, either multiple small lapses that allow Pantoja to win rounds because Royval is, goofing around looking for a guillotine, or, working for leg locks from the bottom instead of getting back up, or maybe, he gets into one of those close quarter brawls and gets dropped and ends up losing that round. He either loses that way, or just Pantoja being the more disciplined and technical grappler just wins rounds, or maybe even taps him out again just through being the less insane of the two of them, which is a very, very relative term here. What round did you say for Pantoja?
I said third.
I'm not going to be different just for the sake of being different. That's kind of what's been stuck in my head all week. Give me Pantoja to win. I'm going to say third round submission. I have no idea who's going to win the first 2 rounds, because even if Royval is all over Pantoja the first 2 rounds and wins them both, I'm still comfortable with Pantoja by third round submission. Sometime in the first 3 rounds, Royval is going to make a mistake he can't recover from. I'm with you. Pantoja by third round submission here. Easy fight of the night contender. With that, we come to the main event of UFC 296, a welterweight title fight between your defending champ, Leon Edwards, and the challenger, Colby Covington. Edwards, the 32-year-old Brit, is 21-3 with 1 no contest overall. He is 13-2 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He is, of course, your champ. He won the title from Kamaru Usman with a shocking, almost buzzer-beating 5th round head kick knockout last August, then came back to show it was no fluke in their rematch in March, winning a majority decision in just much more straightforward fashion. The second title defense of his run will come against Covington. 35-year-old Oregonian by way of Florida is 17-3 overall. He is 12-3 in the UFC. He is the former interim welterweight champ. He became interim champ, was stripped of the title in record time, like within 3 months, because he decided to go get reconstructive surgery on his nose. Had a bit of a reality check about just how important he was to the UFC's promotional plans, but has nonetheless stayed kind of in the forefront of the headlines and obviously in the title picture, since he has alternated wins and losses in his last 4 fights, but is nonetheless in a title fight once again. He hasn't fought since last March, a little over 18 months ago, where he took a very one-sided unanimous decision over Jorge Masvidal at UFC 272. He, of course, lost the rematch in the street, where Masvidal basically ran up, sucker punched him. Covington's recovery and Masvidal's legal woes resulting from that altercation have filled up the headlines ever since then. But Covington is here, finally back in action. A few people have been squawking about whether he deserves this title shot over someone like Bilal Muhammad, but however you feel about it, he's here. Edwards seems to be happy to take him on. The odds, this one's close. Edwards is your favorite. He's only minus 145. Covington is plus 120 as your underdog. Keith, obviously Colby Covington is intentionally a lightning rod. We're talking about a guy who, in an unguarded moment, has told us flat out.
Yeah,
I was told by the UFC that I was going to get cut, win or lose. So he did a very kind of Chael Sonnen-esque thing where he put on a particular personality to draw attention. Negative or positive, it seems to be all the same to him, and it's a lot easier to draw heat. Just, say some outrageous things loud enough, people will pay attention. Some people love it, some people hate it, but it's turned him from an also-ran into a star. And the same way as Sonnen, it was accompanied almost at the same time by him just kind of morphing into a much better fighter. Like, Chael Sonnen was a grindy wrestler with mediocre stand-up and terrible sub-defense. And then all of a sudden, he became an incredible wrestler with surprisingly good stand-up and still problematic sub-defense. Covington, the same way. He's turned from just kind of a grindy, anonymous wrestler into a shockingly good striker. Covington, love him or hate him, the dude's a great fighter. He's one of the greatest welterweights of this era. If he beats Edwards, he enters the list of the greatest welterweights of any era. He is one of the best wrestlers in the division. And we've talked all up and down this card about fighters that are good takedown artists, but not a great conventional wrestler. That is not Colby Covington. He is a former elite collegiate wrestler, like I think 2-time All-American, who that is translated because he was the kind of wrestler that it was going to work. It worked on athleticism as well as timing. He has great shots from the outside, excellent chain wrestling. He is relentless. He's taken down he's taken down people that were thought impossible to take down. Look at his 2 fights with Kamaru Usman. Not only were they both extremely close, but he wrestled Usman at least to a standstill. And we're talking about a guy that had a substantial size advantage on him and was himself a great wrestler. Covington is a high volume, accurate kickboxer on the feet. He doesn't have huge power. And part of it is that, he's kind of chosen to sacrifice a little bit of power for speed. He doesn't sit down on his punches the same as a Kamaru Usman, let alone a Tyron Woodley, who would spend all around trying to load up one cannonball right cross. And also because he's a bit undersized for the division. Like Covington, I imagine Covington is the smallest top 15 welterweight in terms of like walking around weight out of camp.
Yeah. I mean, that's because Gil Burns likes to be fat. Gil Burns could be small, though.
He
Gil
could
Burns
be. I mean, Burns is a former lightweight. But aside from Burns, who, he's another guy that gets by on incredible athleticism. Covington's one of the smallest.
Yeah.
And, that's really the only thing you can point to as a flaw with him. Like, everything else at least kind of flows from that. I do think this is a tough stylistic matchup for Covington because, Covington is a great wrestler, but so is Edwards. He's already the greatest MMA wrestler to come out of the UK ever. And he's a great offensive as well as defensive wrestler. He is an outstanding kickboxer with, power when he shows it. He snatched victory from the jaws of defeat by absolutely icing Kamaru Usman with one shot.
Yep.
And he's going to be a good bit bigger than Covington. And he's bigger than Covington in ways that matter. He's just a taller guy. He's going to be a taller guy with greater reach who uses his reach well. Like, he has good footwork. He's good at keeping fighters with shorter reach on the outside. Covington's not going to go away. He's relentless. He has, some of the best weaponized cardio, one of the best motors in the history of the division. He's never going to stop coming. I think individual rounds are going to be really close, but he's just going to be stuck between trying to take Edwards down through persistence, and he'll probably get some takedowns, but I think Edwards is going to get back up, or trying to close the distance and box with a longer, probably more technical boxer with better power. So, give me Edwards to probably win 4 rounds out of 5, where all the individual rounds are very close. Covington's never completely out of it, but just comes up a little short at the end.
Yeah. This is, I'm surprised. I'm with you, man. I'm surprised the line is this close. Not. It's so when I say that, I don't mean like, I don't think Covington can win. It's more of when I think about a betting line, I expected Edwards to be a big favorite, especially because Covington's had it fought so long. Mm-hmm. Leon Edwards is really well rounded. He showed in his second fight against Usman that it wasn't a fluke that he won. That was the big thing. His last fight, he was like, "Oh, it wasn't a fluke." He was losing the entire fight, and then he won. Well, he looked good the entire fight last one. It was close, and I saw some people give it. I didn't give it to. Did I give it to Usman? Either way, it was very close. Like, there was no, I think most people gave it to Edwards, but he's He's good, man. He's a southpaw. He moves really well. He's very defensively sound. His first defense is just moving his feet and not being there. His second defense is good head movement. He understands range really well. He likes to work from distance. His kickboxer is very accurate. He sets up his shots well with feints. He draws out opponents' attacks and then counters. He's good at making them move the way he wants, but we saw that with the high kick. He's got underrated power. He's a really good wrestler, offensively and defensively. He got takedowns, and he took a takedown on Usman a couple times, I think. Mm-hmm. He sets up his entries well with his striking. He uses his size, inside the clinch where he can battle and work the upper body. I was impressed by how much improved he was there, because that was an area that Usman, man, that's the danger zone against Usman, is going chest to chest and battling in the clinch. In the second fight, that wasn't an issue for Edwards. He's got good control. He's got mean ground and pound, and he's got the cardio and the intelligence to go 25 minutes. Now, Covington, he's also southpaw, so that's always interesting when two southpaws fight each other. He's got really good volume, as you mentioned. When he's on his best, he's fearless. He overwhelms with his output. He just goes. He knows he's going to eat some shots, but he's just going to beat you with a pace. Like, he fights. There's a wrestler I love watching. He's a high schooler. He might be my favorite wrestler to watch right now. This guy, Bo Bassett. I mean, he literally is high schooler, beats college kids. He just won Iron Man. He wins everything. And he wrestles like Kobe Covington fights. He's just on the gas the whole time. It's so much fun to watch. And that's what Covington needs to do. He needs to be on the gas the whole time. He needs to be in Leon Edwards' face and don't let him cruise. Get him to fight on his back foot. And you're going to eat some shots. That's how he fought Usman the first time. He can't fight him like he fought Usman the second time, where he was gun shy and he gave away rounds to Usman in a fight where he had this late surge and was winning and actually hurt Usman and had moments and won the later rounds, but he was already put himself in such a hole. If he does that against Edwards, he's going to lose. Like, it's better to go out, get knocked out than losing a decision where you didn't put himself in the fight. Now, when he slides, he's good at sliding his head, out of the pocket and then landing his own shots, attacking with combos, very good at throwing down in the pocket. And I love that he wraps his hands. He's really good at like throwing shots, get his opponent's hands up, and then either one of two things, either wrapping his punches around their defense or shooting underneath. Both are good signs for him. He loves that like wraparound left hook. He's good hand fighting. You said that he doesn't have a glaring flaw. I'd say his punching power. He'll buckle you. I mean, he's buckled a lot of guys. I mean, he buckled Usman, but he won't start you. He does well to use his, belly to, chest to chest, backing his opponent against the cage, wearing there, but he doesn't have the size to really grind him out. He's got good kicks to the body, especially in the southpaw. Like southpaw to southpaw, that might be something that's there for him. No, southpaw to southpaw it'd be different. If southpaw orthodox would be open, but still, he's got good body kicks. He's a very good wrestler. You mentioned good entries. More about being relentless to get the fight to the ground than just like, there's better guys with the entries, but he'll shoot, he'll get to the hips. Even if he doesn't get the takedown, just leaning on them, wearing on the legs, making them carry their weight. Like, that's something he's good at. Great top control if he gets to fight the ground. You get back up, he's dropping back down, he's reducing, he's making you work all the way to get up, because he understands it's not necessarily about getting the takedown, it's making you work in a position that's going to tire you out, where he wins later on in the fight. If he does actually pin you down, he advances to the ground, he's got good ground and pound, and obviously you talked about it, some of the best cardio we've ever seen. That said, I'm really concerned about Covington, considering he's won 2 fights in the last 4 years. One of them was against the ghost of Tyron Woodley. The other one was Jorge Masvidal, who was always, in my opinion, always a little overrated, but also the perfect stylistic matchup for Covington. That was always a terrible matchup for Covington. Terrible matchup for Masvidal. Covington was. Not to mention, he hasn't fought in, I think it's like 21 months.
Yeah, last March was the last time he fought. It's 2021.
And he's not like, what? How old is he?
35. He's
not young.
Nope.
And especially that style. Like, if Colby Covington wins the title, he's not going to be a long run.
No.
And it's now or never for him. This is his last chance. That said, I think he missed the window. I think those close battles to Usman was his chance. I think he was right there. I think Usman was a better fighter than him. I think stylistically that was a matchup he could win. It was tough. And Kamaru Usman is a tough matchup for anybody. Mm-hmm. But it was one that he could win. And, even though the guy's better, you just keep it close and steal it. I think that was his chance. I think he's going to be that guy deep down on his couch talking about interim titles and I should have won this and I should have won that. I don't think he's ever going to be the undisputed champ. I see him possibly having a volume advantage here. He needs to be fearless. If he gets a takedown, I doubt he'll be able to keep Edwards down. I expect Edwards to keep him on the edge of his punches, to jab him, to teep kick him, to kick his legs. I think he might hurt Colby a couple of times too. Every time I think about the wrestling, I think Edwards might take Covenant down. I think he might be too big and too strong for him. I think it's going to be an easy win. I think Edward cruises, and I don't think he's a big enough favorite. Give me Edwards. I thought about taking a late stoppage like the Usman Covington fight in the first one, but I say just cruises. Give me Edwards by decision.
All right, that's 2 picks for Leon Edwards to successfully defend his title for the second time, this time at the expense of Colby Covington. And that's it. The Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 296, Edwards versus Covington. I have been Ben. He has been Keith. If this is your first time watching or listening to one of our previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring a mix of actual in-depth analysis, not quite as much story time and joke time as usual this time, just because we had 14 fights to get through. Yeah. Some of them, some big fights. Almost all of them really good. Yeah. So normally a little bit goofier than this one, but give us a like, subscribe, drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We'd love to hear your take on some of these fights. Certainly, if you think we're out of our minds with any of these picks, let us know, and we'll give you all the credit you deserve. But most importantly, join us for the recap. We will be live on the Sherdog YouTube page about 10 minutes after the main event. Keith will take the captain's chair. We will talk about all 14 of these fights in reverse order from the main event all the way down to the also fantastic welterweight card opener. We'll talk about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something.
That'd be a long one.
Yeah. We'll talk about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers. And we'll talk with you, because the live chat is open that whole time. So we are taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we'd love for you to be part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week.
One thing, Ben, real quick. I know some people, they don't listen to the recap show, which is, first of all, shame on you, because not only should you listen, you should be on live and talk to the chat. It's a really fun community. But if you don't do that, maybe make that a resolution in 2024. But then this will be the last show of the year for them. So I thank them for listening. I want to wish them a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, all that stuff. So thank you guys.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. But we thank you even more if you joined us for the recap, and we'll wish you a proper Happy Holidays then. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week. And if you don't enjoy these fights, something's wrong with you.